I had been useful to Darius Vane for exactly as long as I could carry his bags. The moment the cave wolves came, he proved it. He kicked me through the side passage, cut the support rope, and brought half the tunnel down between us. I could still hear his men running, while I lay under a shower of dust with a broken sword in my hand. 3 pale eyes appeared in the dark ahead. I reached into my old backpack for anything I could throw. My fingers closed around a loose stone. A cut across my palm had opened when I hit the ground, and blood ran down my wrist. When I dropped the stone inside, one red drop struck a frayed seam beside the old brass buckle. Something hidden under the lining warmed against my fingers. A faint line of light appeared on the inner cloth. 1 out of 100. I thought I was bleeding badly enough to imagine things. Then I added a second stone. 2 out of 100. The wolves were coming closer. For the first time in my life, I had a reason to be grateful that the ground was covered in rocks. Cale Arden grabbed another stone. The number changed again. 3 out of 100. He stared into the battered brown backpack. Its leather was cracked at the seams. One buckle had been replaced with a strip of rope, and the bottom had been patched so many times that the original cloth barely showed. He had carried that bag through mines, ruins, swamps, and 3 years of being treated as the least important man in every adventuring party he joined. It had never glowed before. Cale touched the frayed seam. A thumb-sized piece of metal hidden under the lining was warm, and fresh blood darkened the cloth above it. He had carried the bag for 3 years without seeing a single light. Whatever had changed, it had changed when his blood reached that hidden piece. He had no time to investigate further. A growl rolled through the narrow passage. Cale lifted his head. At 21, Cale was lean from years of hauling other people's equipment. His silver-white hair was gray with cave dust, and blood ran from a shallow cut above his left eyebrow. His amber eyes were unusually bright in the darkness. People remembered those eyes more easily than they remembered his name, though the effect was usually ruined by the fact that Cale spent most of his time carrying other people's packs. The first cave wolf stepped into the dim light of a blue crystal growing from the wall. It was as large as a farm dog, but wider through the shoulders, with a pale horn rising between 3 cloudy eyes. A second shape moved behind it. Cale looked at the broken half of his sword. He had paid 6 silver pieces for it. Darius had laughed at him then too. Cale backed away and picked up another stone. 4 out of 100. The wolf lunged. Cale threw the stone by instinct. It bounced off the animal's shoulder and accomplished nothing except making the wolf angrier. Right. Ordinary rock. He turned and ran. Cale was not a gifted swordsman. He had never awakened a combat class. He could not code a weapon in aura or cast a fire spell. But 3 years as a porter had taught him useful things that proud fighters often ignored. He knew which tunnels carried fresh air. He knew which mushrooms grew near underground water. He knew that cave wolves hated narrow ledges because their heavy front legs made sudden turns difficult. Most importantly, he had watched other people fight them dozens of times. He raced down a sloping passage, snatching stones from the ground whenever his hand could reach one without slowing him. 7, 9, 12. The leading wolf gained on him. Cale heard claws scrape stone behind his boots. He waited until the passage narrowed, then threw himself sideways through a gap between 2 mineral pillars. The wolf tried to follow. Its shoulder struck the rock. Cale stabbed with the broken sword. The jagged steel sank only a finger deep into the wolf's neck. The animal twisted. Its horn tore across the front of Cale's leather vest and threw him against the wall. Pain flashed through his ribs. The wolf came again. Cale jammed the remains of his sword between its jaws. The creature bit down. Cheap steel snapped completely. That was my retirement plan. The joke came out as a breathless grunt. Cale shoved the wolf away with both boots and scrambled through the gap. The animal could not follow directly, but the second wolf had already found a wider route. He had seconds. The strange counter inside the backpack became a problem of its own. He could not collect stones while sprinting at full speed. Each time he slowed, the wolves gained ground. Each time he stopped to scoop several stones into his arms. He heard claws echo closer. He reached 31 before the tunnel ended at an underground stream. Kale almost laughed. The water was only knee-deep, but the opposite bank was a smooth wall. A narrow shelf ran along the left side, disappearing behind a curtain of hanging roots. The wolves entered the chamber. Kale stepped into the stream. Cold water soaked through his boots. He scanned the bank. Rounded river stones lay everywhere. His amber eyes widened. "Oh, now you decide to become useful?" He dropped to his knees and began filling the backpack. 32, 37, 44. The first wolf splashed into the stream. Kale grabbed stones with both hands. 52, 59. The wolf was halfway across. 67. Kale saw a large flat rock beneath the water and pulled it free. 70. The second wolf entered the stream behind the first. Kale had no weapon now. 78. His fingers slipped from the cold. 83. The first wolf lowered its head. Its horn pointed directly at his stomach. Kale scooped another armful. 90, 91, 92. The wolf charged. Kale jumped aside. The horn grazed his hip. He fell into the stream, swallowed freezing water, and rolled toward the bank. The wolf turned with difficulty. Kale's hand closed around another stone. 93. He threw it into the bag. Then another. 94. The wolf leaped. Kale rolled under its body. A paw struck his shoulder hard enough to numb his arm. 95. The second wolf was coming around the first. 96. Kale searched blindly beneath the water. His fingers closed around smooth stone. 97. 98. The first wolf recovered and stepped onto the bank. Kale saw a stone beside his knee. 99. The wolf opened its jaws. Kale found one final pebble in the fold of his soaked trouser leg and shoved it into the backpack. 100 out of 100. The faint numbers vanished. A single sentence appeared in their place. Merge available. Kale did not have time to wonder what that meant. He slapped his hand against the glowing word. The backpack jerked so violently that he nearly dropped it. Every stone inside vanished at once. The bag became strangely light. For half a second, Kale thought he had just spent the final moments of his life collecting rocks for nothing. Then, something heavy struck the bottom of the bag. He reached inside. His fingers closed around a smooth, black stone the size of his fist. It was warm, very warm. The surface had pale silver lines running through it, like cracks filled with moonlight. A small impression formed in Kale's mind the moment he touched it. Impact stone. Dense core. Concentrates force at the point of impact. Returns to bonded holder after a successful throw. The wolf pounced. Kale threw the stone. He had spent years watching trained adventurers use throwing knives. He was not one of them. His aim was rough. His stance was bad, and the throw left his wounded shoulder screaming. But the stone did not need elegance. It struck the wolf between its upper pair of eyes. The sound was not the dull knock Kale expected. It sounded like a hammer hitting a wooden door. The wolf's head snapped backward. Its front legs left the ground. The entire animal rolled once through the shallow stream and crashed against the opposite bank. The second wolf stared too. The black stone flashed with silver light, shot backward across the chamber, and smacked directly into Kale's open palm. He yelped and nearly dropped it. Could have warned me about that part. The second wolf charged. Kale was ready this time. He waited. Cave wolves relied on explosive speed. Their weak point was the moment after they committed to a charge. High-ranked hunters simply met them head-on. Kale had never possessed that luxury. He stepped behind a stone column. The wolf followed. At the last instant, Kale ducked left. The wolf's horn scraped the pillar and turned its head. Kale threw from less than 3 paces. The impact stone struck the side of the creature's jaw. Bone cracked. Kale caught the returning stone with both hands this time, stepped forward, and drove it down on the base of the horn. The wolf collapsed. Kale stood over it, breathing hard. His entire body trembled from cold and exhaustion. He looked at the black stone in his hand, then at the backpack. then at the countless ordinary rocks covering the riverbed. A ridiculous laugh escaped him. Darius Vane had left him in a mine because Kale was too weak to be worth protecting. 100 worthless stones had just given him a weapon stronger than the sword he had saved for 3 months to buy. Kale sank onto the bank and stared at the glowing silver veins running through the impact stone. If 100 rocks could become this, what would 100 swords become? That question kept him moving. He stripped the cave wolves of their horns and hides as well as he could with a shard of broken steel. The work was ugly and slow, but porter work had taught him not to abandon sellable material. He wrapped the better hide around his wounded shoulder and followed the underground stream until he found a maintenance tunnel marked with the faded crest of an old mining company. 2 hours later, Kale crawled through a collapsed drainage opening and saw daylight. He had never appreciated gray afternoon clouds so much. He was less pleased to see 5 men sitting beside the mine entrance. Darius Vane's raid party had made camp there. Darius himself sat on an overturned crate, drinking from a metal cup. At 32, he had spent most of his adult life rising through Ironcrest. He was impossible to miss. His hair was dark red, almost wine-colored, and cut short around the sides. A narrow scar crossed his chin. He wore polished black scale armor that cost more than everything Kale owned, and a broad steel sword rested against his knee. 3 bronze pins on his collar marked him as a ranked captain of the Ironcrest Guild. The same man who had kicked Kale into a monster-filled tunnel looked genuinely surprised to see him, for only a second. Then his mouth curled. "Look who learned to crawl." The other men turned. One of them, a broad-shouldered axe fighter named Pell, laughed when he saw the wolf hides tied badly around Kale's pack. "I thought the wolves would have better taste." Kale walked toward the camp. Darius watched the blood on his clothes, then the empty sheath at his belt. "Where is the supply pack?" Kale stopped. He wondered whether he had heard correctly. The supply pack had contained Darius's spare boots, Pell's cooking pot, 3 coils of rope, and several days of food. Darius had abandoned him to die, and his first concern was luggage. Under several tons of rock. Darius's expression hardened. "You were paid to carry guild property. You collapsed the tunnel on me. I collapsed the tunnel on the wolves. I happened to be standing with them." Pell snorted. Darius rose. He was half a head taller than Kale, and much heavier through the shoulders. "You are alive. That means my decision worked." Kale looked at him for a moment. The old Kale would have swallowed the anger. Porters who argued with ranked adventurers did not receive work. That fact had controlled his life for years. Now he felt the smooth weight of the impact stone resting inside his backpack. He still could not beat Darius, not even close. But something had changed. Kale no longer needed to believe that carrying another man's luggage was the highest point his life could reach. Darius extended his hand, the wolf horns. Kale did not move. "You left those monsters for me, and they were encountered during my guild operation. Then, submit a claim to their next of kin." Pell burst out laughing before quickly pretending to cough when Darius lifted him. Darius stepped closer. The camp became quiet. "Careful, Porter." Kale's ribs hurt. His left shoulder could barely lift above chest height. He had no sword. He also knew Darius well enough to understand that the captain would not kill him in front of 5 guild witnesses over 2 low-grade wolf horns. Kale held his gaze. "I quit." Darius blinked. Kale had imagined saying those words with far more drama. In reality, he was wet, bleeding, smelled like cave wolf, and had 1 boot full of stream water. It was still satisfying. "You think another team wants a porter who loses supplies?" Kale adjusted the old backpack. "I'll take the risk." He walked toward the road. Pell called after him. "You forgot your share of the raid." Kale turned. Pell tossed something. Kale caught it. A small copper coin. The men laughed. Pell pointed at the bundle of junk beside the camp. "And since you're unemployed now, take the trash too. Save us the disposal fee." Several rusted goblin knives, cracked tools, and broken spearheads lay in the pile. Kale looked at them. Then, At Pell. All of it? Please. Darius shook his head as if Kale's stupidity had become exhausting. Kale smiled. He spent 10 minutes tying the entire pile into a rough bundle. The laughter followed him down the road. He did not mind. Before leaving the camp, Kale had kept the hilt of his broken sword and placed it into the backpack first. He added 22 pieces from Pell's trash pile behind it. By the time the mine disappeared behind the trees, the counter inside his backpack read 23 out of 100. For the first time in years, being given garbage felt like being paid twice. The road to Bright Hollow followed the side of a wooded ridge for nearly 6 miles. The city was not large by royal standards, but it was the main trading center for 4 nearby dungeon zones. Adventurers came for contracts. Merchants came for monster materials. Smiths came because broken weapons were cheap and good ore was plentiful. Kale had always seen Bright Hollow from the bottom of that economy. A porter earned 12 to 20 copper coins for a normal day, 30 on a dangerous run. A cheap meal cost 4. A bed in the lowest common room cost 6. A usable iron sword started around 3 silver pieces, meaning 300 copper. Darius had paid Kale 14 copper that morning. Or he would have, if the raid had ended normally. Kale checked the 2 silver and 41 copper coins remaining in his pouch. Then he looked at the remaining junk tied to his backpack. 22 discarded pieces, plus the broken sword hilt already occupying the first slot. 23 out of 100. He needed 77 more. The thought should have sounded absurd. Instead, it made the walk to Bright Hollow pass quickly. At sunset, Kale reached the outer gate. 2 guards glanced at his torn clothes and the wolf hides. One raised an eyebrow. Bad day? Kale considered the question. He touched the backpack. Started badly. The guard chuckled and waved him through. Bright Hollow's lower market was busiest in the evening. Smithies threw orange light onto the street. Adventurers shouted over one another in front of contract houses. Food stalls filled the air with roasted onions, pepper, and monster boar fat. Kale went past all of them. His destination was a narrow shop near the south wall, with a crooked wooden sign that read, Tovin Salvage. Tovin Gray was a thin man in his 50s, with a round bald head, a magnificent black mustache, and the permanent expression of someone who believed every customer was trying to rob him. He looked up from a ledger as Kale entered carrying his bundle. Then he looked at Kale's clothes, then back at the bundle. No, Kale stopped. I haven't asked anything. You are bleeding on my floor. The answer is still no. I want to buy scrap. Tovin slowly lowered the ledger. Buy? Yes. From me? That's generally how shops work. Tovin narrowed his eyes. Kale untied the bundle and showed him the damaged goblin weapons. I need cheap blades, broken tools, spearheads, things nobody wants. Tovin's suspicion deepened. For what? Decorating. With this? I have unusual taste. Tovin studied him for another moment, then gestured toward 3 wooden barrels at the back. Anything in those is 2 copper each. If you cut yourself, you pay for the blood on the floor. Kale counted. 49 damaged metal items. With the 23 he already had, that made 72. He bought all 49. Tovin watched him fill the backpack, and then frowned when the bulky pieces seemed to settle much more neatly than expected. The bag's 100 merge slots accepted each full item without changing its outside shape, but Kale quickly learned that the storage was not infinite. The glowing count showed each occupied slot, 72 out of 100. He needed 28. Kale pointed at a basket beneath the counter. Those? Tovin glanced down. Broken kitchen knives. Price? 1 copper each. I'll take 28. Tovin leaned both hands on the counter. Son, are you building the worst army in history? Kale placed the coins down. Something like that. The broken short sword hilt remained in the first slot, exactly where Kale had placed it outside the mine. It was the closest thing he had to a proper weapon base. He added the 28 broken kitchen knives to the other materials already stored. The final knife brought the total to 100. The moment the count reached 100, the familiar sentence appeared. Merge available. Kale swallowed. The impact stone had been made from nearly identical natural material. This batch was a mess. Knives, spearheads, rusted chisels, damaged scissors, bent goblin blades. Would it work? He activated the merge. The backpack grew warm. Metallic sounds rang faintly from inside, like a smith striking an anvil, far below the ground. Then, silence. His hand closed around a leather-wrapped grip. He drew a short sword. The blade was dark gray and slightly wider than his old one. It had no jewel, no magic glow, no decorative engraving, but the edge was straight and clean, the balance excellent. An impression entered his mind. Collector blade. Improved durability, improved edge. Materials poorly compatible. No active trait formed. Tovin leaned forward. The merchant's eyebrows climbed. Where was that? In the bag. I can see that. Why was that in the bag? Kale inspected the blade. Forgot I had it. Tovin's expression clearly said that he considered this answer offensive. Let me see. Kale handed him the sword. Tovin's joking expression vanished as soon as his fingers closed around the grip. He checked the edge with his thumb, then struck the flat lightly against the counter. Balanced. He examined the steel. No forge mark. He looked at Kale. This is not cheap work. How much? If you're selling, maybe 8 silver. 10 to the right, idiot. Kale's heartbeat jumped. He had spent less than 1 silver on the materials. What if I wanted to buy something like it? 15. Of course. Tovin handed it back. His gaze dropped to the old backpack. Let me see the bag. Kale's hand tightened on the strap. Refusing would not erase the fact that Tovin had just watched a sword appear from a bag that had been full of junk. More importantly, Kale needed to know whether the strange space belonged to the object or to him. He made sure the backpack was otherwise empty, then held it open. Tell me what you see. Tovin looked inside. An empty bag that should have torn apart 6 years ago. Kale could see a faint 0 out of 100 along the inner seam. Tovin's eyes passed directly over it. Kale placed one damaged knife into the first slot. The metal vanished from ordinary view as the pale count changed to 1. Tovin leaned closer. You dropped it. Reach inside. Tovin did. His hand moved through empty cloth. He found nothing. Kale reached into the same space and pulled the knife back out. The count returned to 0. For several seconds, Tovin said nothing. Kale looked at the blood-stained seam near the brass buckle. The bag had awakened when his blood touched whatever was hidden there. Now its impossible storage answered only to him. He still did not know why, but at least theft would not automatically give someone else the same power. Tovin slowly handed the backpack back. I preferred this morning, when you were merely buying dangerous trash. His eyes moved to the collector blade. Then where did the sword come from? Kale sheathed the sword through his belt. Found a better use for scrap. Tovin stared. Kale smiled and picked up his empty bundle. See you tomorrow. Why tomorrow? I'll probably need more trash. Tovin watched him leave. That is the most threatening sentence anyone has said in my shop this year. Kale stepped back into the evening market with a real weapon at his side and only a handful of coins left. He should have felt poor. Instead, every barrel of broken iron suddenly looked valuable. Every butcher's pile of discarded bone looked useful. Every rack of cheap tools became a question. 100 of those. What would they become? He had barely reached the inn district when a guild notice nailed to a post caught his eye. Horned boar bounty. Adult male. Injured near the West Road. Reward. 5 silver for proof of kill. Kale looked toward the darkening western gate. Then, at the collector blade. He had spent the last 3 years watching fighters earn more in one monster hunt than he made in a week carrying their equipment. For the first time, he had a weapon that gave him a chance. Kale turned away from the inn. He was tired, bruised, hungry, and still wearing one wet boot. 5 silver was 5 silver. He headed west. The injured horned boar had been seen 2 miles outside the western wall. That mattered. A healthy adult horned boar was a bronze rank threat. A low-ranked fighter with ordinary equipment had no business hunting one alone. An injured boar was still strong enough to split a wooden cart, but pain made the animal predictable. Kale had watched Darius's party kill 3 of them over the years. He also remembered what happened to a porter named Joran, who had decided that watching experts fight was the same as being an expert. Joran had spent 6 weeks learning to walk again. Kale did not intend to repeat the lesson. He stopped at a street stall before leaving the city and spent 4 of his remaining copper on a small packet of salt and another 6 on a cheap oil lamp. The vendor gave him a strange look when he also asked for a strip of red cloth from the trash basket. "Are you hunting something?" "Hopefully something slower than me." Comforting plan. Kale tied the cloth around a branch and left through the gate. The west road crossed open farmland before entering a belt of scrub woods. The last light was fading when he found the first sign of the boar. A young tree had been gouged chest high. Mud around the roots held a print almost twice the width of Kale's hand. Blood darkened one edge. Kale crouched. The animal was favoring its right side. The hunters who injured it had probably cut the rear leg. That would slow the charge, but a wounded animal would be more aggressive. He followed the tracks for 10 minutes and found a patch of overturned soil near a dry creek. Kale did not approach. He climbed a low ridge and studied the area. The boar stood beneath an oak, tearing roots from the ground. It was ugly, even by monster standards. Thick black bristles covered a body heavier than a draft horse. 2 ivory horns curved from its skull. One of them cracked near the tip. A deep cut ran across its rear thigh. Kale's first thought was that 5 silvers suddenly seemed cheap. His second was that he could still leave. Its small red eyes fixed on him. Apparently not. Kale backed toward the creek. The boar snorted and pawed the ground. Kale took the impact stone from his backpack and weighed it in his right hand. His shoulders still hurt from the cave wolf. He would not get many strong throws. He needed the first one to matter. The boar charged. It was slower than a healthy animal. That did not make it slow. Kale ran sideways toward the creek bank. The boar adjusted, head low, horns pointed forward. He waited longer than instinct wanted. 3 paces. 2. Kale threw the impact stone at the animal's injured rear leg. His aim was not perfect. The stone hit higher than intended, just above the knee. The concentrated force still did its work. The boar's hind leg buckled. Its momentum carried it forward. One horn struck the edge of the creek bank and tore through packed dirt. Kale jumped down into the dry channel. The black stone returned to his hand. The boar spun. Too quickly. Kale had expected the injury to keep it down longer. The monster lunged from the bank. He raised the collector blade. The horn struck the flat. Kale felt the impact through both arms. The sword held. Kale did not. He flew backward and landed hard in gravel. The boar came down into the creek after him. Kale rolled as a hoof smashed the place where his chest had been. He slashed upward. The collector blade cut through the bristled skin along the animal's belly, but the wound was shallow. The boar screamed. Kale scrambled behind a fallen tree trunk. The animal rammed it. Rotten wood exploded. A broken branch struck Kale across the cheek. He tasted blood. His first plan had been simple. Damage the bad leg. Force the animal to stumble. Cut the throat. The first part had worked. The second had lasted about 2 seconds. He needed another approach. Kale looked at the red cloth tied around the branch he carried. He had brought it because horned boars tracked movement poorly when enraged, but reacted violently to bright color. Darius used the trick to redirect charges toward shield fighters. Kale had no shield fighter. He threw the branch over the creek bank. The red cloth caught on a low thorn bush. The boar's head snapped toward it. Kale slapped the flat of his sword against a rock. The sharp noise made the boar turn back to him. Wrong choice. He picked up a fist-sized piece of gravel and threw it at the cloth. The branch moved. The red strip fluttered. The boar charged it. Kale ran along the creek behind the animal. The boar hit the thorn bush, tore through it, and drove its horn into the trunk of a young elm. For a moment, the cracked horn stuck. Kale did not waste it. He threw the impact stone into the injured rear leg again. This time, he hit the joint. Bone broke. The animal collapsed on one side. Kale sprinted forward. The boar wrenched its head free and swung its remaining horn. Kale stopped short. The horn passed inches from his stomach. He stepped in after the swing. One hand on the grip, one on the back of the blade. He drove the collector blade behind the boar's jaw. The first thrust did not go deep enough. The boar surged upward and nearly threw him. Kale shoved harder. The improved edge slid through hide and muscle. Hot blood ran across his hands. The animal bucked once, twice. Then its weight sagged. Kale stayed behind the head until the legs stopped moving. Only then did he let go of the sword. He sat on the ground beside the dead boar for a full minute. His hands shook. He had won. He had also learned something important. A strong item did not make him strong enough to be careless. The sword had prevented the horn from breaking his weapon. The impact stone had damaged the leg. His knowledge of the monster had created the openings. Any one of those missing, and the fight could have ended with his body in the creek. Kale wiped the collector blade on the grass. "Training," he told the dead boar. "Apparently I need that too." The boar did not disagree. He cut off the cracked horn and the intact one, then removed enough hide to prove the kill. Moving the entire carcass alone was impossible, so he marked the location and returned to Bright Hollow after dark. The bounty clerk at the Western Contract House was a sleepy woman with violet hair pinned into a thick bun. She examined the horn, then Kale's face. "You killed it alone?" "It was already wounded." "That was not my question." Kale looked at the fresh cut across his cheek. "Yes." She pushed 5 silver pieces across the counter. "Then my professional recommendation is that you stop looking so surprised about it." Kale pocketed the money. Good advice. He paid 2 copper for the contract house to send a collection wagon after the carcass. He would receive another small payment once the usable meat and hide were sold. By the time he reached the Rusted Bell Inn, midnight was near. The innkeeper, a large woman named Hessa, with orange hair braided over one shoulder, looked at his muddy clothes and pointed toward the back wash basin before he could speak. "Not on my floor. I am a paying customer." "Then you can afford water." Kale obeyed. His room cost 6 copper. The mattress had one suspicious lump in the center, and the window rattled when the wind blew. But after the mine, it looked luxurious. Kale laid the collector blade beside the bed. Then he placed the impact stone next to it. 2 improved items. 1 day ago, he had owned neither. He opened the backpack and stared at the empty inner cloth. No instructions appeared. No helpful explanation. No voice congratulated him. The bag waited. Kale liked that. He had spent enough time around guildmasters who turned every favor into a lecture. The next morning, Kale stopped at the contract house first. The butcher had sold the usable boar meat and hide. And after the collection fee, Kale received another 1 silver and 18 copper. The amount was modest beside the 5 silver bounty, but it closed the job cleanly and gave him more room to experiment. Then he returned to Tovin's salvage. The merchant was already outside. He pointed at Kale before Kale reached the door. "No, I still haven't asked. You killed a horned boar last night. News travels quickly. Half the west gate saw you come back covered in blood with a horn over your shoulder. You then bought a room instead of a healer. That means either you are stupid, or the armor under your torn coat is better than it looks." Kale glanced down at his battered leather vest. "It isn't," Tovin grunted. "Then stupid." Kale put 3 silver coins on the counter. "I want cheap, complete items this time. Things that still count as usable. Knives, tools, lever pieces. Lowest price possible." Tovin did not touch the coins. "How many?" "That answer makes me hate this conversation." Kale smiled. Tovin finally swept the coins into a drawer. He led Kale into the rear yard. There were racks of damaged tools, old armor, chipped plates, kitchenware, cracked scabbards, ropes, and stacks of objects that had outlived their first owner's patience. Kale spent nearly an hour sorting. The backpack taught him its rules only by responding, A whole spoon occupied one slot. A spoon broken deliberately into 3 pieces still occupied 1 slot worth of material when placed together. When Kale tried putting each broken piece in separately, the counter did not advance after the first. He tested a clay cup next. He dropped it. It shattered into 19 pieces. The bag still recognized the fragments as one ruined item. Kale frowned. Tovin watched from the doorway. "You buying that cup?" "I broke it." "Then yes." Kale paid 1 copper. He deliberately broke another cheap bowl into smaller and smaller pieces until Tovin became visibly offended. "You do not have to manufacture them." "I need to know something." "What?" "Whether the universe respects accounting." Tovin stared at him. "I liked you more when you were bleeding." Kale placed the 100 fragments of 1 bowl into the bag. The count showed 1. He laughed. That closed one obvious path to cheating the mechanism. One object could not become 100 by being cut apart. Then, Kale tried currency. He fed 100 copper coins into the slots. This hurt more than breaking pottery. When he activated the merge, a heavy reddish bar appeared. Purified copper ingot. High material purity. Monetary markings removed during merge. Kale held it in both hands. 100 copper had become metal worth roughly 80 to 90 copper to a smith. He had successfully transformed money into less money. Excellent. Tovin took the bar, checked its weight, and looked impressed, despite himself. "This copper is absurdly clean." "How much?" 85 copper. "I paid 1 silver for it." "You invented bad business." Kale sold the bar anyway. Information had value. He could not print money by merging coins. That meant his profit had to come from improving objects whose market price rose faster than the value of their materials. Weapons, armor, tools, food, monster products. Kale spent the afternoon testing cheap combinations. Some failed to produce anything exciting. 100 mixed wooden utensils became an extremely durable cooking spoon. Kale stared at it. Tovin stared at it. "I could probably kill someone with this." Tovin took the spoon. "Not in my shop." A basic leather glove, used as the first item, with 99 scraps of low-quality hide, became a reinforced work glove. Useful, but not valuable enough to justify the amount of labor needed to collect the inputs. A cheap hunting knife, combined with 99 pieces of mixed low-grade metal, became a very good hunting knife. Kale wrote prices in a small paper notebook. He had never kept one before. By evening, the page showed a simple truth. The backpack was strongest when he combined many things that people considered individually too cheap, damaged, or common to matter, but that still contained real material or craftsmanship. The better the inputs matched, the better the result. The first item shaped the result. The remaining 99 contributed compatible qualities. Kale went to the food market next. That was how he met Lena Marr, the egg seller. Lena was a round woman with bright green hair and forearms built from lifting crates. Her stall displayed eggs from chickens, marsh hens, blue ducks, and one enormous spotted egg that Kale did not recognize. He pointed at the ordinary chicken eggs. "How much for 100? Lena looked at him, then behind him, then back. 100? "Do you run a kitchen?" "No." "Bakery?" "No." "Feeding an army?" "No." "Are you planning something illegal?" Kale considered. "I don't think eggs are regulated." "They will be after whatever you're doing." She charged him a bulk price of 60 copper and packed the eggs carefully into straw trays. Kale rented the use of Hessa's back kitchen for another 5 copper and carried them to the inn. Hessa blocked the doorway. "No." Kale stared at her. "Why is everyone saying that before I ask anything?" "You have 100 eggs." The last young adventurer who brought 100 eggs into my inn tried to hatch a fire drake in the laundry room. "These are chicken eggs." That makes me less concerned and more confused. Kale paid the kitchen fee. He selected the cleanest egg as the first item and placed the rest into the backpack. The merge took only a few seconds. When he reached inside, he found one egg. It was slightly larger than a goose egg. The shell was pale gold with a smooth, pearly shine. Golden sustenance egg. Concentrated nutrition. Restores ordinary fatigue and nutritional deficiency, equivalent to several substantial meals. No permanent physical enhancement. Kale read the impression twice. No permanent enhancement. He was almost disappointed. Then he remembered that an egg which could replace several meals was already absurd. He cracked it into a pan. The yolk was deep orange. The smell filled the kitchen almost immediately. Hessa stopped halfway through carrying a bucket. What is that? Egg. That is not what eggs smell like. It was an ambitious chicken. Within minutes, 3 guests had wandered toward the kitchen. Then 6. A drunk miner offered Kale 2 silver for half the pan. Kale refused because he needed to test the effect. He ate. The taste was rich, but not overwhelmingly strange. More importantly, the ache in his muscles eased over the next 20 minutes. His headache faded. The hollow exhaustion left by the mine and boar hunt disappeared. His wounds did not close. The bruises remained. But his body felt as if he had slept a full night and eaten an enormous breakfast. Hessa folded her arms. How many more? None. Make another. I would need another 100 eggs. Then buy them. Kale looked at the crowd outside the kitchen. For the first time, he saw an obvious market that did not involve fighting monsters. Adventurers paid ridiculous prices for compact travel food. A golden sustenance egg took little space and replaced multiple meals. The next morning, he returned to Lena. She saw him coming and covered her egg baskets with both arms. No, Kale sighed. I understand how Tovin feels now. Lena eventually sold him 300 eggs after he promised he was not breeding anything. Kale performed 3 separate 100-item merges and produced 3 golden sustenance eggs. He kept 2 and brought 1 to Tovin. The merchant ate a small piece, stared at the rest, and immediately stopped chewing. How long does it keep? About a week, raw. 2 days once cooked. How much do you want? You tell me. Tovin considered. At least 5 silver to an ordinary adventurer. More to a long expedition. But if you flood the market, people ask questions. Kale nodded. That matched his own concern. The backpack could make valuable goods. It could also make him very visible. So he did not flood the market. He sold 1 egg through Tovin. He kept 1 for himself. He traded the third to Hessa for a month of private room rent and kitchen access. Hessa agreed so quickly that Kale knew he had negotiated badly. He pointed at her. You could at least pretend to think about it. I did. Inside. How long? About half a heartbeat. Kale learned another lesson. Having a miraculous product did not automatically make him a miraculous merchant. For the next 10 days he worked. Not every hour needed a grand discovery. He took simple monster contracts to improve his sword handling. He trained at the public yard in the morning, paying a retired guard 2 copper per session to correct his footwork. He bought cheap salvage in the afternoon. At night, he compared combinations and recorded results. His body did not magically become stronger. It became better because he was actually using it. The collector blade made practice easier because the balance was excellent. The impact stone became useful at controlling distance, though Kale hit a training fence often enough that the yard owner threatened to charge him for repairs. One morning, Kale tried to catch the returning stone one-handed. It slammed into his palm and knocked his breakfast onto the ground. The retired guard stared at the spilled porridge. Kale shook his aching fingers. Gravity, powerful foe. By the end of the 10th day, Kale had enough money to attempt something more useful than food. He bought a plain leather jacket as a base. Then he visited hunters, butchers, and Tovin's yard for damaged hides. Boar leather, rock lizard hide, thick marsh rat skin, cheap pieces that were too small or scarred for a normal armorer. 99 usable hide items. The merge produced a dark brown jacket with subtle layered scales beneath the surface. 100 hide coat. Distributes blunt impact. Increased resistance to claws, teeth, and tearing. Flexible structure. Kale put it on. It fit him closely despite the mixed materials. Tovin struck him in the chest with a wooden mallet. Kale stumbled backward. What was that for? Kale said. You said it distributes impact. You could have warned me. Then you'd tense. Kale rubbed his chest. The hit hurt, but far less than it should have. Tovin nodded. Good coat. Kale stared at the mallet. You're enjoying this. Immensely. The coat changed more than Kale expected. For years, he had looked like exactly what he was, a poorly paid porter in patched clothing. Now his silver white hair had been cut short at the back. The wound over his eyebrow had healed into a thin line, and the fitted dark coat made his lean build look deliberate rather than underfed. The amber eyes were still the same. People simply met them more often now. He still carried the ugly old backpack. That part he refused to change. By the end of the second week, Kale's notebook contained prices from every salvage stall in Bright Hollow, and one line written twice. 100 swords. He had enough to begin collecting them. The real experiment was about to start. Collecting 100 swords was not as simple as finding 100 pieces of metal shaped like swords. Kale discovered that on the first afternoon. Bright Hollow had plenty of blades, but cheap swords that still counted as complete items tended to have owners. Even cracked militia weapons cost more than scrap. A sword that had failed inspection at a forge could still sell for 20 or 30 copper. A usable old blade went for half a silver or more. At those prices, 100 swords could swallow everything Kale had earned. So he stopped thinking like a customer and started thinking like a porter. Porters knew where unwanted things went. He visited the guard repair depot and learned that damaged weapons were auctioned in lots every 6th day. He spoke to undertakers who handled the property of adventurers with no family. He asked monster hunters whether they wanted the crude swords taken from goblins. He traded hauling labor for old equipment from a training school. He also began selling a few improved objects through Tovin. Not miracles. That would be stupid. Kale used one cobbler's awl as a base and merged it with 99 supporting items made up of worn needles and other complete, fine metal tools. The result was an unusually durable precision awl. A leatherworker paid well for it. He merged a woodcutter's axe with 99 damaged iron tools. The result held an edge for days longer than ordinary steel. Tovin sold it to a lumber crew at a premium. The profits went directly into swords. Kale's notebook filled with numbers. 32 out of 100. 46. 58. At 63, Tovin finally asked the question he had been holding for 2 weeks. Why swords? Kale looked up from a rack of bent blades. You buy everything. I understand that much. You have the purchasing habits of a raccoon with a gambling problem. But lately, swords. Tovin had already watched the collector blade appear from the backpack, and for 2 weeks he had kept that impossible detail to himself, even when buyers asked where Kale sourced his goods. He had already seen too much for a ridiculous lie to help. More importantly, he had given Kale evidence that he could keep his mouth shut. I want to make something. The merchant stroked his black mustache. With 100 swords. Hopefully. Forge them together? Something like that. Tovin looked at the old backpack. Then at Kale. He did not ask more. That was one reason Kale continued doing business with him. Instead, Tovin pointed at a stack near the wall. City guard condemned 20 old practice blades this morning. Tang cracks. Bad balance. Still swords. Price? For you, 22 copper each. Last month, you would have charged 15. Last month, you were stupid enough to buy broken spoons. Now I know you have a purpose. Kale folded his arms. 20. 21. 19. You cannot bargain downward after I compromise. Seems to be working. Tovin glared. They settled at 20. Kale left with the swords and a smile. Tovin shouted after him that smiling customers were bad for his reputation. By the 3rd week, Kale had 84. His training had improved too. The retired guard at the public yard was named Garen Holt. Garen had iron gray hair, one missing ear, and the unpleasant habit of correcting mistakes with a wooden staff. Kale learned quickly, because every mistake hurt. Your sword is better than you are, Garen told him one morning. Most men with expensive steel blame the steel. Garen made him repeat basic cuts until his forearms burned. Kale had expected training to involve clever techniques. Instead, it involved feet. Where to place them. How not to cross them. how to keep balance after a missed strike, how to retreat without turning his back. Monster doesn't care what your sword costs if your ankles are tied together by stupidity, Garen said. Kale paid another 2 copper for that wisdom. He also practiced throwing the impact stone. At 10 paces, he became reliable. At 20, respectable. Beyond 30, local fences remained in danger. The 100-hide coat let him train more aggressively, but Garen refused to let him depend on it. If armor saves you, good. The staff struck Kale's ribs. If you decide armor means you may stand still, bad. The staff struck him again. Kale blocked the 3rd hit. Garen nodded once. Progress. Sword number 99 arrived on a rainy afternoon. Kale laid the blades in a rented storage room behind Tovin's shop and counted them twice. 99. He needed 1 more. That should have been easy. It was not. The guard auction had ended. Tovin had sold his remaining cheap blades. The lower market had several swords, but prices started above 1 silver. Kale could afford that now, but stubbornness had become involved. He walked through the Adventurer's Square and spotted exactly what he wanted. A young swordsman with bright blue hair was arguing with a weapons dealer. The young man's name was Felix Orr. Kale knew him by reputation. Felix came from a comfortable merchant family and had awakened a promising blade skill 6 months earlier. He was talented enough to know he was talented, and young enough to make everyone else know too. A plain old sword hung at his left hip. In his hands, he held a new silver-edged blade. Felix paid the dealer 4 gold pieces for it. Bright Hollow counted 10 silver pieces to 1 gold, so the new sword had cost 40 silver. That was wealthy merchant family money, not something an ordinary bronze adventurer spent casually. Kale waited until the transaction ended. Are you selling the old one? Felix looked him up and down. Recognition flickered. You are the porter from Ironcrest. I heard you killed a boar. Boar heard too. Felix frowned, unsure whether that was a joke. Kale pointed at the old sword. How much? Felix looked at the worn weapon, and then at Kale's face. 2 gold. Kale laughed. Felix's cheeks reddened. It is worth maybe 40 copper. Then buy one for 40. I would, if the market had one today. So you need mine. Kale did. He also disliked giving satisfaction to a man who had multiplied the price absurdly because he sensed need. Not that much. Kale walked away. Felix called after him. 1 gold. Kale kept walking. 8 silver. Kale turned a corner. He had 99 swords and enough patience to wait until tomorrow. 20 minutes later, a crowd gathered around the public training ring. Kale was crossing the square when a familiar blue head caught his attention. Felix had challenged another young adventurer to test his new blade. The silver-edged sword looked impressive. It also made a faint metallic whistle on every hard swing. Garen had taught him that sound. Loose tang. Felix lunged. His opponent parried. The silver-edged blade snapped at the hilt. The broken upper half spun through the air and buried itself in the sand. Silence held for a second. Then someone laughed. Felix went completely red. Kale continued walking. Behind him came quick footsteps. Wait. Kale turned. Felix held the old sword. 40 copper. Kale looked at it. 30. Felix stared. You said 40. That was before I watched you insult the gods of bargaining. 35. Done. Kale paid. Felix handed over the weapon and muttered something about cheap steel. Kale inspected the old blade. It was plain, but straight and well-maintained. Your old sword lasted 3 years. Felix looked at the broken, expensive blade in his other hand. Kale added, maybe apologize to it. He walked away before Felix could answer. Tovin laughed so hard at the story that he had to sit down. Then the merchant locked the rear storage room. Kale laid the 100 swords out in rows. This was different from the junk merge. The items matched. They were all complete swords. Some were cheap, some damaged, a few were decent. Kale had spent weeks gathering them. He selected the best base. It was a balanced longsword, bought from a retiring guard. The blade was ordinary steel, but carefully made. He placed it into the backpack first. 1 out of 100. Then the rest. 10, 20, 50. The bag became warmer as the count rose. At 99, Kale paused. Tovin stood near the door. Well? Kale took Felix's old sword. Last one. 100 out of 100. Merge available. Kale activated it. The backpack pulled inward as if all the air inside had vanished. A low ringing tone filled the room. Not loud, pure. The kind of sound a fine blade made when struck lightly. Silver light leaked through the seams of the old bag. Tovin took one step backward. Kale reached inside. The grip that met his hand was wrapped in dark blue leather. He drew slowly. The sword was longer than the collector blade and much slimmer. Its steel held a faint layered pattern, like 100 thin lines folded together. The guard was simple. The pommel was black. No gemstones decorated it. The weapon did not need decoration. Kale knew what it was the instant his palm closed around the grip. Blade of 100 edges. Legendary grade. Extreme edge retention. Extreme structural integrity. Force of a completed cut concentrates along the final line of contact. Kale read the impression again. Legendary. Tovin whispered a curse. Kale looked at him. You know the grade? I know metal. Tovin came closer, but did not touch the blade. That thing should not exist in my storage room. Technically, it exists in my hand. That was not reassurance. Kale made a test cut through a hanging strip of damaged leather. He barely felt resistance. The leather separated. Behind it, the edge had also passed through a thin wooden board. Tovin stared at the clean cut. Do not test it on anything else I own. Kale sheathed the sword immediately. His pulse hammered. This was what the backpack could do with 100 ordinary swords. He remembered the river stones, the collector blade, the golden sustenance egg, the 100 hide coat. Each step had been larger because the inputs had improved. He imagined 100 legendary blades. The thought felt ridiculous. Then again, so had this sword 3 weeks ago. Tovin closed the shutters. Do not walk into the street waving that. I wasn't planning to. Good. Because you look like a young idiot, and young idiots with legendary weapons attract older idiots with knives. Kale nodded. He trusted Tovin's commercial wisdom more every day. Unfortunately, hiding the sword forever would make owning it pointless. 2 days later, Bright Hollow's Adventurer Hall held its monthly advancement trial. Kale registered. The clerk looked at his old record. Quarter classification. Unranked combat. Correct. 3 previous applications, all denied before field test. The clerk looked up. Why? Poor equipment, poor combat score, poor judgment, according to one evaluator. Which evaluator? Captain Darius Vane. The clerk's mouth tightened slightly. Ironcrest supplied many examiners. Today's practical examiner is not Captain Vane. That's why I'm here. The trial began with basic tests. Kale did not dominate them. That mattered. He ran faster than he had a month ago because he had trained. He lifted more because he was eating properly. His sword forms were competent but still rough compared with lifelong fighters. He passed. Not brilliantly, honestly. Then came the field ring. 20 candidates entered a stone arena divided into small combat zones. Each had to demonstrate practical ability against summoned or captured low-grade monsters. Kale killed 2 ash crabs so easily that there was nothing dramatic about it. One crab raised a claw. Kale cut through the joint. The second rushed. He kicked it sideways and drove the sword through the shell seam. Garen, watching from the stands, nodded. A month earlier, Kale would have turned both kills into a dangerous mess. The next opponent was a moss hound. Kale used the impact stone once to stagger it, then ended the fight with a clean cut. Several observers noticed the returning stone. More noticed the sword. The blade of 100 edges moved through monster hide too smoothly. The final group test was supposed to be controlled. That was the word the examiner used. A bronze rank armored troll was released into the largest section of the arena. 6 candidates entered together. Their task was not to kill it. They only needed to survive 5 minutes and strike marked scoring plates attached to its body. Kale was assigned with Felix Orr and 4 others. Felix carried a replacement sword. This one was far less expensive. He glanced at Kale. Nice blade. Thanks. Cost? Complicated. Felix looked offended by the answer. Before the gate opened, a handler tested the troll's control collar. Blue light pulsed across the metal. Then one side crystal flickered amber. The handler opened the housing, tightened the loose contact, and tested it twice more. Both stun crystals stayed blue, and the troll's shoulder muscles locked, exactly as they were supposed to. The practical examiner wrote the fault on his slate. The collar would be replaced after the trial. For now, the redundant system had passed 2 tests. Kale noticed the exchange. 3 years of carrying repaired guild equipment had taught him that stable after repair was not the same thing as new, but nothing in the test suggested an immediate failure. The gate opened. The armored troll walked out. It stood nearly 12 feet tall. Natural bone plates covered its shoulders, chest, and thighs. Iron restraints remained around its wrists. A control collar at its neck allowed handlers to stun it if necessary. The candidates spread out. For the first minute, everything went as planned. Felix struck a scoring plate on the outer thigh. A spear fighter tagged the shoulder. Kale used the troll's slow turn to touch a plate behind the knee. Then the control collar sparked. Once, twice. The blue light died. An examiner shouted. The troll stopped behaving like a trained test monster. It ripped one iron restraint apart. The candidates froze. That was the worst thing they could do. The troll swung. A young shield fighter took the hit and flew across the arena. Kale heard something crack when the boy landed. Move! His shout broke the others from shock. Felix dragged the injured shield fighter toward the wall. The troll charged them. Kale threw the impact stone. He aimed at the right knee joint, where bone plate did not fully cover the side. The troll stumbled, but did not fall. Too large, too heavy. The returning stone smacked into Kale's palm. The troll turned toward him. Kale ran away from the injured candidates. The creature followed. He could hear examiners at the outer gate trying to release the emergency lock. The troll swung. Kale ducked. The fist passed above his silver hair and smashed a section of stone railing. Fragments struck his back. The 100-hide coat absorbed some of the impact. Kale still hit the ground. The troll raised a foot. Kale rolled. The heel smashed a crater beside him. He came up with the legendary sword drawn. He could cut the monster. The question was where? Natural armor covered almost everything. Kale had watched high-rank parties fight armored trolls before. They used hammers to break plates or magic to burn the joints. The impact stone could damage a joint, but not enough in one strike. The troll turned. Kale noticed a scoring plate still tied across its left forearm. Bright yellow cloth. Movement, color, an idea. Felix! The blue-haired swordsman looked over from the injured fighter. Kale pointed at the plate. Cut the straps. Throw it left. Felix hesitated only a moment. Then he understood enough to act. He sprinted in, while the troll faced Kale, slashed the 2 leather straps, grabbed the yellow plate, and threw it toward the arena wall. The troll's eyes tracked the movement. Not as strongly as a horned boar. Enough. Kale threw the impact stone at the same right knee joint. Again, the troll shifted to turn. The stone struck while its weight was moving. The knee buckled. The monster dropped onto one hand. Kale ran, not toward safety, toward the troll. He stepped onto the lowered forearm, jumped to the shoulder plate, and nearly slipped. His boot scraped bone. The troll roared and straightened. Kale grabbed the edge of a plate with his left hand. The movement threw him against the monster's neck. The control collar was there, broken. Beneath it, a narrow section of flesh separated 2 bone plates. Kale drove the blade of 100 edges into the gap. The sword entered cleanly, too cleanly. Kale almost overextended. He remembered Garen's staff and shifted his feet against the shoulder, instead of leaning all his weight forward. The troll reached for him. Kale pulled the blade free and jumped. He landed badly, rolled, and felt pain shoot through his ankle. Behind him, Dark blood poured from the troll's neck. The creature remained standing. It charged Kale. He could not outrun it on the injured ankle. He threw the impact stone one final time. Not at the head. At the right knee. Third hit. Same point. The damaged joint gave way. The troll crashed forward. Kale stepped to the side as its shoulder hit the arena floor. The exposed neck stretched. He used both hands. One full cut. The legendary blade passed through the wounded gap and severed the major vessels. The troll convulsed, then stopped. For several seconds the arena was silent. Kale stood with blood running down his sword. He was breathing so hard his chest hurt. Then someone in the stands shouted. The noise rolled outward. Candidates yelled. Spectators rose. Even the examiners looked stunned. Kale looked toward Garen. The old guard did not cheer. He pointed at Kale's feet and shouted, "Your landing was terrible." Kale started laughing. The tension broke across the arena. Felix laughed too. The shield fighter, still lying near the wall, lifted one hand weakly. Did we pass? The examiner stared at the dead troll. Yes. That answer earned the loudest cheer. Kale left the arena as a newly recognized bronze rank adventurer. He also left with a problem. Hundreds of people had seen the blade of 100 edges. Among them stood Darius Vane, the red-haired captain, watched from beneath the upper gallery. He had expected to see a former porter embarrass himself. Instead, he had watched Kale kill an armored troll with equipment no low-ranked adventurer should possess. Darius noticed the sword. He noticed the dark coat. He noticed the black stone that returned after every throw. 3 unusual items. One man. Darius's gray eyes narrowed. Hell stood beside him. Maybe the porter got lucky in the mine. Darius looked toward Kale. Once is luck. He turned away from the railing. 3 times is a source. Kale did not hear him. He was too busy discovering that promotion had its own inconveniences. A hall official handed him a bronze badge. A weapons broker immediately offered to buy his sword for 30 gold. Another offered 40. A third claimed it resembled a lost family heirloom and asked to inspect it privately. Kale declined all 3. Tovin pushed through the crowd, grabbed Kale by the sleeve, and dragged him toward the exit. What did I tell you about older idiots with knives? They haven't used knives yet. Give them time. Outside, Kale finally had room to breathe. Garen joined them. The old guard looked at the sword. Legendary? Kale nodded. Garen grunted. Thought so. You don't seem surprised. I am old. Surprise is bad for my back. He tapped Kale's ankle with the staff. Kale winced. Sprain. Rest 2 days. I can still walk. Good. Walk home. Garen left. Tovin watched him go. I like him. He hits me. That is part of why. Kale had just started toward the lower market when a woman stepped into his path. Mira Solon was 24, nearly Kale's height, and athletic, with long crimson hair tied high behind her head. A narrow braid, wrapped with bronze thread, ran along her right temple. Her eyes were bright green. She carried a spear with a leaf-shaped bronze head and wore light armor reinforced at the shoulders. Kale recognized her from the arena stands. She had passed a silver-ranked trial earlier that day. Beside her stood Ren Vale, a slender 23-year-old with dark teal hair, round gold-rimmed spectacles, and a short bow over one shoulder. His white and green coat marked him as a licensed field healer. The woman pointed at Kale's sword, not interested in buying it. Interested in hiring you. Kale blinked. That was new. She introduced herself, and Ren gave Kale a small nod when Mira said his name. Mira led a small independent team that specialized in material hunting. Their third fighter had retired after a knee injury. They needed someone competent enough not to die, and strange enough to accept payment partly in monster parts. Ren adjusted his glasses. Mira believes you satisfied both requirements. Mira nodded. I saw you collect the troll's broken collar after the exam. Kale had done exactly that. The collar had been discarded as damaged equipment. When Kale inspected it later, the contact tightened before the trial was blackened through from the inside. The repair had passed its test, but the old conductor had failed under sustained strain. What are you hunting? Rock lizards. North Quarry. Kale thought of claws, scales, and stone-hardened hides. How many? Mira smiled. Now I know that question is going to become annoying. Kale touched the backpack strap. Probably. For the first time, Kale was joining a party because they wanted his ability in a fight, not because they needed someone to carry their food. That evening, while he ate at the Rusted Bell with Mira and Ren, a man in an Iron Crest cloak sat at a table across the room. He ordered one drink. He barely touched it. His eyes kept moving toward Kale's backpack. Kale noticed on the third glance. He did not confront the man. He finished his food, laughed when Hessa charged Mira extra for accidentally putting a spear through the coat rack, and went upstairs as though nothing was wrong. Then he moved his bed against the door. The next morning, he visited Tovin before sunrise. I need somewhere else to store the swords and materials. Tovin raised one eyebrow. Someone watching you? Tovin looked at the old backpack, then at Kale's new bronze badge. Congratulations. For what? You've become successful enough to develop enemies. Kale sighed. I preferred the boar. Boar was more honest. Tovin opened a trapdoor behind the counter. A narrow cellar lay beneath the shop. Rent is 2 silver a month. 1.5. Done. Kale carried his reserve equipment below. Across the street, the Iron Crest watcher saw only a young bronze adventurer buying more junk. That was exactly what Kale wanted him to see. The North Quarry sat in a limestone basin 2 hours from Bright Hollow. Once it had supplied building stone for the city wall. Then, rock lizards discovered that the warm cracks between the cut faces made excellent nests. Miners abandoned the lower levels. Adventurers moved in. Mira's plan was straightforward. They would clear the upper galleries, collect intact claws and hides, then leave before dusk. The matriarch nests below the 3rd shelf, she told Kale, on the road. We do not go there. She says this every trip, because someone always decides the larger monster means a larger payment. Mira glanced at him. Someone? Your previous swordsman. He survived. He retired because his knee now predicts rain. Kale listened. He liked the way they planned. No speeches about glory. No promises that everyone would be fine. They discussed retreat routes, signals, expected monster numbers, and what each person would do if separated. Kale told them the truth about his combat ability. He was improving, but Mira was better with a spear, and Ren had more field experience. He did not tell them how the backpack worked. He did tell them what he wanted. Claws. Mira looked at him. Only claws? 99 good ones if possible. Ren nearly walked into a tree. That is remarkably specific. I collect things. Mira looked at the old backpack. I noticed. They reached the quarry before noon. Rock lizards were ugly, flat-bodied creatures with slate-colored scales and 6 legs ending in hooked claws. Individually, they were not difficult for bronze or silver rank adventurers. Kale learned how much stronger he had become in the first fight. A lizard rushed from behind a stone pile. A month earlier, he would have needed to think. Now he stepped aside, let the jaws pass, and cut through the neck seam. 1 strike. Done. Mira raised an eyebrow. Kale looked at the dead creature. Small one. Still cleaner than your troll landing. Garen told you? Garen tells everyone. Kale decided to stop paying the old man. He knew he would not. Mira controlled open space with her spear, using the shaft to redirect charges and the point to kill through eye sockets or throat gaps. Ren stayed behind them, firing short arrows into limbs when needed. His healing magic was limited, but precise. Thin green light closed cuts and slowed bleeding. He could not restore broken bones or refill a person's stamina from nothing. Kale appreciated that. Real limits made planning possible. By mid-afternoon, they had killed 27 lizards. Kale collected claws. Each adult had 6, but damaged claws were common and he wanted intact pieces. Mira watched him inspect the 70th claw. Do you grade them? Yes. What happens to the bad ones? Sell them. What happens to the good ones? Kale smiled. Research. Ren said, I have begun to suspect research is his word for anything he refuses to explain. Kale pointed at Ren's spectacles. Why are the frames gold? Research. Mira laughed. The easy mood ended when they found the blood. A long smear ran across a stone shelf, then another. A backpack lay beside the wall. Mira crouched. Fresh. Less than an hour. They heard shouting below, not from the route they planned to take. Mira moved to the edge of the shelf. On the lower gallery, 4 young adventurers were trapped between a collapsed ramp and a group of rock lizards. One man held a broken shield. A woman with a bow had blood running down one leg. The lizards were not the main problem. Something enormous moved in the darkness behind them. Mira swore. Matriarch. Ren looked toward the safest exit. We can leave now. That was the correct contract decision. The trapped party had gone below the marked boundary. They had taken the risk after every warning sign. Mira's jaw tightened. Then one of the young adventurers slipped. A rock lizard leaped on him. The shield bearer knocked it away. Mira made her decision. We get them to the upper ramp. We do not fight the matriarch unless she follows. Ren nodded. Kale drew the blade of 100 edges. Good. Mira looked at him. I spent 3 years getting abandoned when things went wrong. He looked down at the trapped group. I dislike the tradition. Mira went first. Her spear struck one lizard through the mouth and kicked another from the ledge. Kale cut a third across the forelegs. It dropped. He finished it with a thrust behind the skull. Ren's arrows forced 2 more away from the injured archer. The trapped adventurers saw them. Upper ramp, Mira shouted. Move when we open it. The matriarch came out of the lower tunnel. It was more than twice the size of the others. Its scales had thickened into layered stone-colored plates. The 6 hooked legs were long enough to lift its belly above Kale's waist. Its mouth opened sideways, exposing rows of grinding teeth. It climbed directly onto the vertical wall. Kale looked up. That seems unfair. Ren fired. The arrow struck a scale and snapped. The matriarch ran along the wall as easily as the floor. Mira shoved one trapped adventurer toward the ramp. Move! They formed a retreat. Kale did not try to duel the creature. He covered the injured. Every time a normal lizard approached, his legendary blade ended it quickly. The fights did not deserve elaborate tactics anymore. His equipment and growing skill simply outclassed them. Then the matriarch dropped from the wall. Mira blocked with the spear shaft. The impact drove her to one knee. Kale slashed at the creature's side. The blade of 100 edges cut one outer scale. Only one. The matriarch twisted. Its tail hit Kale across the chest. The 100-hide coat spread the impact, but Kale still flew backward and struck the ground hard. Ren sent green light toward Kale. Anything broken? Kale pushed himself up. Ask after we leave. The young adventurers reached the upper ramp. Mira followed. Ren backed toward it. The matriarch climbed the wall and ran above them. It was going to cut them off. Kale took the impact stone. He had learned the creature's armor was too thick for a clean sword kill from the front. But the smaller lizards had one weakness: the soft inner joints, where the 6 legs met the torso. The impact stone hit the matriarch's middle left joint. The creature slipped. One claw tore a groove through limestone. The stone returned. Again, Mira said. Kale threw at the same joint. The matriarch moved this time. The stone struck a scale. No useful damage. The creature launched from the wall. Mira drove her spear upward. The point entered the underside, but did not penetrate deeply. The matriarch's weight bent the shaft. Mira let go before it crushed her arms. Now her weapon was pinned under the monster. Kale ran forward. The matriarch snapped at him. He retreated. Not fast enough. One hooked claw caught his coat and dragged him off balance. The reinforced hide did not tear. Kale hit the ground. The matriarch lifted its leg to pull him closer. He cut the claw at the second joint. The legendary blade severed it. The animal shrieked. Mira grabbed Kale by the collar and hauled him away. They reached the ramp. They could leave. The matriarch could climb. It followed immediately. The injured group had no chance to outrun it in open ground. Kale looked at the quarry walls. He remembered the creature moving vertically. Then he looked at the pile of claws tied to his collection bag. 86 good ones. Not enough. A dark idea formed. He pointed toward a narrow cutting trench between two tall stone blocks. Can you get it in there? Mira followed his finger. Yes. Then I need the left side. That was becoming one of Kale's favorite things about her. Mira picked up a fallen spear from the rescued group. She slammed the shaft against the stone. The matriarch turned. Mira moved left. Kale moved right. Ren and the rescued adventurers climbed toward safety. The matriarch chose Mira. She ran toward the trench. At the last moment, she planted the borrowed spear, vaulted sideways, and rolled behind a block. The matriarch entered the narrow cut. Its body fit. Its legs did not. The outer claws scraped both walls, slowing it. Kale threw the impact stone into the injured middle joint. This time, the creature could not dodge. Crack. The length folded. The matriarch sagged to one side. Kale ran along the top of the stone block and jumped onto its back. The layered scales shifted beneath his boots. He stabbed downward at the seam behind the head. The sword entered 2 inches. Not enough. The matriarch slammed its body against the wall. Kale jumped off before his leg was crushed. Mira stabbed into the damaged joint. The creature kicked. The borrowed spear broke. That is 2 weapons this quarry owes me, she shouted. Kale threw the stone again. Same joint. The impact broke through. The middle leg collapsed. The matriarch lost support on its left side. Its head struck the wall. Kale moved in. The mouth snapped. He stopped outside range, waited. The creature snapped again. Its head extended. Kale stepped past the jaws and cut into the soft tissue behind the jaw hinge. The first cut opened it. The matriarch thrashed. Kale backed away. Mira grabbed a broken spearhead and drove it into the same wound from the other side. The matriarch reared. Kale used the moment. Both hands on the sword. Full cut through the open seam. The blade of 100 edges reached the spine. The creature dropped. Dust rolled through the trench. Kale stood still until he was sure it would not move. Mira sat down on a rock. I specifically said we were not fighting her. Kale looked at the dead matriarch. Technically, she followed. Ren arrived with the rescued party. His spectacles were crooked. Excellent. We have defeated language as well as the monster. Kale laughed, then regretted it when his ribs hurt. The rescue changed the economics of the trip. The young adventurers offered part of their contract reward. Mira refused most of it. Kale asked for their lizard claws. Mira stared at him. Of course you did. By the time the bodies were harvested, Kale had more than 100 intact claws, including several from the matriarch. He selected 99. Back in Bright Hollow, he bought a plain steel climbing gauntlet from Tovin. The merchant noticed the claws. What did you kill? Rock lizards. How many? Enough. Tovin touched one enormous matriarch claw. This came from a rock lizard? Large family. Kale put the steel gauntlet into the backpack first. Then, 99 claws. The merge created a dark metal glove with overlapping gray plates along the fingers. 4 short, retractable talons rested over the knuckles. Stone Predator Gauntlet. Enhanced grip. Claws bite into stone and ordinary armor. Impact force. Distributed through forearm. Kale tested it on the cellar wall. The claws sank into limestone. Tovin's face darkened. Not my wall. Kale pulled his hand free. 4 neat gouges remained. I'll pay. You will repair. The gauntlet became his most unusual item yet. It did not simply make a familiar weapon stronger. It combined the base object's form with a compatible property of monster materials. That opened an entire category of possibilities. Kale's notebook gained several pages that night. Boots plus jumping beast tendons, cloak plus camouflage scales, shield plus shell plates. He crossed out anything he could not source realistically. The backpack was powerful. It was not a wish. That distinction kept his ideas useful. The next week brought a different problem. Tovin's normal suppliers stopped selling to him. The first was a guard quartermaster who claimed all condemned swords had been reserved. The second was a junk broker who suddenly doubled prices. Then Lena told Kale that a man in an Ironcrest cloak had asked how often he bought eggs. Kale set his breakfast spoon down. Hessa noticed. Trouble? Ironcrest. She looked at the old backpack under his chair. Want me to throw them out? Not yet. Hessa cracked her knuckles. The offer remained clear. Kale visited 3 markets that afternoon. Same pattern. Large lots of damaged weapons were unavailable. Monster material prices rose as soon as his name was mentioned. Someone was spending money to make his buying harder. The captain finally approached him 2 days later. Kale was leaving the adventurer hall after collecting payment for the quarry rescue. Darius waited beneath the stone archway. His polished black scale armor looked exactly as it had on the day of the mine. Kale had changed enough that the contrast was obvious. Dark 100 hide coat, legendary sword, bronze badge, old backpack. Darius's gaze moved across each item. You have done well. Kale kept walking. Darius matched his pace. That wasn't an insult. I'm adjusting. Darius ignored it. Ironcrest could use you. Kale stopped. For a moment he wondered if the captain had forgotten what happened in the mine. Then he realized men like Darius remembered everything. They simply expected weaker people to treat their cruelty as temporary weather. You left me to die. I made a combat decision. You then asked where your spare boots were. They were expensive boots. Kale stared at him. Darius almost smiled. Join Ironcrest. Full combat share. Access to guild dungeons. Better contracts. Whatever source you found for that equipment, the guild can help you exploit it. There it was. Not apology. Acquisition. Kale shook his head. No. Darius's expression cooled. Independent adventurers have short careers. Porters have shorter ones around you. Darius called after him. Markets are difficult when merchants stop cooperating. Kale turned. The threat was finally spoken. Darius continued. Guilds exist because access matters. You can have a miracle in your hands and still starve if nobody sells you what you need. Kale looked down at his backpack. Then at the adventurer hall behind Darius. Good point. Darius seemed pleased. Kale added, I'll stop buying from your people. He left. Darius had correctly identified a weakness. He had misjudged the response. Kale did not need one specific shop. He needed items. He shifted his work almost entirely to monster contracts, abandoned ruins, escort jobs that paid partly in damaged equipment, and salvage rights after fights. Mira and Ren joined him often. Their arrangement became simple. Money was divided fairly. Useful common materials went to Kale if the others did not need them. In return, Kale occasionally supplied the team with improved practical gear. He did not explain the exact mechanism of the backpack. Mira eventually set a rule for the team. She did not need to know where every strange item came from, as long as Kale's secret did not create a danger they had not agreed to face. If that changed, he had to tell them before the danger reached the group. Ren added that before was the important word. After that, they stopped asking questions he was not ready to answer. Mira received a spear reinforced through a full 100-item merge once Kale had enough surplus. He used her old spearhead as the base, and 99 compatible spearheads, ferrules, and intact fittings as the supporting items. Ren received a compact field case through another full 100-item merge, using his old medical case as the base, with 99 damaged but complete medical boxes, leather pouches, buckles, and protective fittings. It kept glass vials from breaking when he fell. Ren examined it. How much? Considerate payment for the quarry. I healed 1 bruised rib. You also did not ask why I needed 99 claws. Ren adjusted his spectacles. I am a healer. I recognize dangerous symptoms. Curiosity is one. The team's reputation grew. So did Kale's. Not explosively, credibly. Over the next month, he moved from the cheapest in-room to a small rented house behind Tovin's district. The ground floor became storage. He still ate at the Rusted Bell often, because Hesse's stew was better than his cooking, and because Hesse threatened to charge him an abandonment fee if he disappeared. His finances improved, but his expenses grew too. Better materials cost more. Storage cost money. Information about dungeon openings cost money. Training cost money. Kale spent much of what he earned on the next merge. That was exactly what he wanted. His wealth was becoming equipment and access. Darius continued to pressure merchants. It mattered less every week. Then Bright Hollow shook. The first tremor hit before dawn. Cups fell from shelves. A section of old wall cracked near the northern district. The second tremor came at noon. By evening, news spread through every guild hall in the city. A sinkhole had opened in the abandoned royal quarry east of Bright Hollow. Below it, explorers found bronze doors bearing the crest of the kingdom that had ruled the region 3 centuries earlier. Tovin read the notice twice. Royal Arsenal. Kale stood beside him. The public description listed preliminary findings: ancient weapons, damaged armor, automated guardians, sealed vaults, large quantities of military salvage. Tovin slowly turned his head. Kale was smiling. Do not. What face? The one you made before buying 100 eggs. Kale took the notice from him. For ordinary adventurers, the Royal Arsenal promised treasure. For Kale, one line mattered more than all the others. Estimated weapon inventory unknown. Potentially several hundred surviving pieces. His backpack felt suddenly very light. The city announced a joint expedition for the following week. Ironcrest would be there. So would every major guild in Bright Hollow. Kale signed his name anyway. This time he would enter the dangerous place by choice. And this time, he would not be carrying anyone else's bags. The Royal Arsenal changed Bright Hollow before anyone entered it. For 6 days, the city filled with people who smelled opportunity. Weapon buyers arrived from neighboring towns. Priests came to inspect the old royal crest. Scholars argued about whether the underground complex had been an armory, a fortress, or a burial vault. Street vendors doubled the price of travel rations and called it wartime demand. Hesse called it theft and raised the price of stew by 1 copper. Kale pointed this out. Mine is honest theft. I tell you before you order. Kale paid. He spent the week preparing more carefully than he ever had for a raid. The blade of 100 edges was sharpened, even though it barely needed it. The stone predator gauntlet was checked for cracks. The impact stone went into a leather pouch at his belt, rather than the backpack, so he could reach it quickly. He bought rope, chalk, water, dried food, bandages, lamp oil, and 2 ordinary backup knives. He did not merge them. That surprised Mira. You have a magical obsession with improving things, and you are taking ordinary rope? Good rope does not need to be legendary to stop me falling into a hole. Ren nodded solemnly. Growth. Kale ignored him. The expedition would include 42 people divided among 6 teams. Ironcrest contributed 12, the largest single group. Mira's independent team received 3 places because of her silver rank and the quarry rescue. Kale's unusual combat record helped secure his own entry. The expedition leader was not Darius. That mattered. Command belonged to Commander Celine Ward, a senior adventurer from the City Council's neutral dungeon office. Celine was a tall woman in her 40s with dark brown skin, tightly braided white hair, and a blue cloak over heavy plate. A long scar crossed the bridge of her nose. She had the voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Before the gates opened, she gathered everyone around a map table. Nobody enters sealed side chambers without marking them. Nobody touches royal command seals. Nobody separates from their assigned group to chase treasure. Salvage is tagged before division. Anyone who creates a collapse because they want one shiny cup will personally explain it to the families of everyone trapped below. Her eyes moved across the gathered adventurers. They stopped briefly on Darius. Kale noticed. Darius noticed too. The bronze doors opened just after sunrise. Cold air moved from below. The first staircase descended more than 100 feet. Ancient blue crystals still glowed along the walls. Kale entered between Mira and Ren. The royal arsenal was larger than expected. The upper level alone contained long halls lined with empty weapon racks, storage rooms, barracks, forge chambers, and narrow transport corridors. Faded banners hung in strips from the ceiling. The first guardian activated within 8 minutes. A suit of bronze armor stepped off a wall platform. Then, 3 more. Their helmets contained no faces. Pale blue light burned inside. Commander Celine ordered the front teams to form. Kale watched the guardians move. Old machines. Fixed patterns. The first advanced with a shield, while the second attacked over its shoulder with a spear. Mira joined the line. Her spear met the guardian's weapon. Kale did not rush in. He studied the joints. The metal was old, but thick. The blade of 100 edges could cut it. But hacking through every guardian would waste time and reveal more than necessary. The impact stone had a better target. He threw at the ankle hinge. The black stone struck. The guardian's foot twisted. Mira immediately understood. She swept the damaged leg with her spear shaft. The armor fell. Kale stepped in and drove his sword through the gap beneath the helmet. Blue light died. The other teams destroyed the remaining guardians. Pell, still serving under Darius, stared at Kale's returning stone. So that's the same rock. Kale caught it. Sentimental value. Pell looked unconvinced. The expedition moved deeper. Salvage tags appeared on objects judged valuable enough to divide later. Kale quickly discovered a wonderful fact. Most adventurers had standards. He did not. A cracked royal spear lying beneath a collapsed rack was considered damaged salvage. Kale saw a complete item made from high-quality old steel. A sword missing part of its guard. A bent cavalry saber. A war pick with a chipped head. A ceremonial blade whose jewels had already been pried out centuries ago. He began collecting. Mira watched the counter routine, even if she could not see the numbers. How many? 12. You really do count. Always. Ren lifted a cracked mace from the floor. This? Kale checked it. Yes. Ren handed it over. Research. They kept moving. By midday, Kale had 26 high-quality damaged weapons. He could not fit unlimited material into the backpack, because each occupied 1 merge slot. Once the count rose, the bag's weight did not increase normally, but the slots remained limited. That meant he had to choose. He ignored ordinary iron. Only old royal equipment. At 38, they reached the first forge hall. The room contained 6 dead furnaces, and a central machine built around a circular stone platform. Scholars stopped to study inscriptions. Kale did too. Not because he could read old royal script, because a wall relief showed ranks of weapons entering a forge complex, and a single radiant blade leaving. For a second, his skin prickled. Mira noticed. Your bag? No, probably coincidence. He hoped it was. He did not need an ancient prophecy explaining his backpack. The bag was useful enough without becoming somebody's chosen destiny. A scholar translated part of the inscription. Standardization Forge. It appears the Old Kingdom melted damaged military equipment and reforged the material. Ordinary metallurgy. Good. The world did not need to revolve around him. The expedition continued. The first serious battle came on the 2nd level. A corridor opened into an assembly chamber filled with weapon stands. The stands activated. Dozens of swords rose into the air. Flying blades, someone shouted. The weapons attacked. Unlike the Bronze Guardians, they were fast. Commander Celine ordered shields forward. Iron Crest fighters formed one wall. Mira's team took the right side. Kale drew his legendary sword. For once, the best answer was simple. The flying blades were old weapons animated by weak control magic. Individually, they were much worse than his own. The first came at his face. Kale cut it in half. The second struck from his left. He parried, turned the blade, and severed it near the guard. A third flew low. Mira knocked it upward. Kale split it. The fight was intense because of the number of weapons, not because any single one matched him. He did not pretend otherwise. Kale stayed close to Mira and Ren, cut anything that entered their space, and let armored fighters handle the largest clusters. Ren used arrows with blunt metal heads to disrupt blade trajectories, rather than trying to destroy them. Mira hooked airborne weapons with the wings beneath her spear point, and slammed them into the floor. They fought like people who had already learned one another's habits. At one point, a sword flew directly toward Ren's back. Kale threw the impact stone. The weapon shattered. The stone returned. Ren ducked too late, and the stone passed over his head. He stared at Kale. "You were going to warn me?" It missed. That is not an answer. They survived. When the last flying blade fell, the floor was covered in damaged weapons. Mira saw his expression. No. Kale opened the backpack. Why does everyone keep doing that? Commander Celine allowed salvage collection, while the wounded were treated. Kale's count climbed quickly. 44. 53. 61. Darius watched from across the chamber. Kale could feel it. The captain no longer tried to hide his interest. Later, while the expedition rested, Darius spoke quietly with Pell and 2 Ironcrest scouts. Kale could not hear the words. Ren could. His hearing was ordinary, but he had positioned himself near a stone column while changing a bandage. That night, after camp was established in an old barracks hall, Ren sat beside Kale. Ironcrest knows about the numbers. Kale stopped cleaning his sword. What exactly? Pell said you always collect to 100. Darius told him to stop guessing and verify. Mira's green eyes sharpened. They followed you that closely? Kale thought about Lena's eggs, Tovin's suppliers, the market pressure. Mira tapped her spear against one boot. We tell Celine. Kale considered it. Darius had not yet violated an expedition rule in front of witnesses. Market pressure outside the dungeon was ugly rather than clearly illegal, and the mine incident still depended on testimony from Darius's own party. But keeping a known risk from the expedition commander would be worse judgment than making a careful report. We tell her what we can prove, Kale said. He pressured my suppliers. He had me followed. Now his people are counting my salvage. I do not explain the backpack. Mira nodded. They found Commander Celine before the camp settled for the night. She listened without interrupting. When Kale finished, Celine folded her arms. What Ironcrest does to merchants in Bright Hollow is outside my authority until someone files a trade complaint. What happens inside this expedition is not. She wrote the report into the expedition log and called Darius over. In front of both teams, she ordered Ironcrest not to touch Kale's assigned salvage, equipment, or personal property. She also changed the marching order so Kale's team would not be paired directly with Darius's unit unless an emergency forced the issue. Darius denied knowing anything about the market pressure. Celine did not argue with him. Good, she said. Then following my order will be easy. After he left, she looked at Kale. If he touches your property or threatens you inside my expedition, you tell me immediately. I cannot act on a story I never receive, Kale agreed. He had not accused Darius of a crime he could not prove. He had put the risk on the commander's map and kept the expedition's real objective first. The next morning, the expedition descended to the 3rd level. The architecture changed. Barracks became vault corridors. Weapon racks gave way to sealed chambers. The guardians became stronger. Kale's count reached 72, then 80. The higher quality weapons were harder to find intact. Some were fused to walls by old magic. Others crumbled when moved. Kale refused to count fragments from the same destroyed object as separate items. He had already learned that rule. At 84, the expedition found a map room. The discovery stopped everyone. A huge stone table filled the center. Metal lines formed the old kingdom's borders. Bright Hollow's region occupied only a small western corner. Across the ocean, another continent was marked with symbols Kale did not recognize. A scholar cleaned dust from a silver plaque. Her face changed. Commander Celine noticed. What? The scholar translated slowly. Reliquary expanse. Final repository for condemned divine armaments. Silence followed. Pell whistled. Divine? The scholar shook her head. That is the literal word. It may be ceremonial. Kale moved closer. The old map showed a chain of islands leading toward the distant continent. Most routes were crossed out. One symbol resembled a black crown surrounded by broken swords. Beneath it, another inscription. The scholar read, Grave of Divine Relics. Kale's fingers tightened around the backpack strap. He had spent weeks wondering what 100 legendary weapons could produce. Now the world had casually placed the phrase Divine Relics on a map. Mira looked at him. She knew enough to understand why that mattered. Kale said nothing. The expedition could not travel there. Nobody even knew whether the old route still existed. The Royal Arsenal remained their problem. Commander Celine ordered copies made of the map and moved everyone onward. Kale left with the image burned into his memory. The fourth level began behind a circular gate. They found skeletons outside it that were far younger than the Old Kingdom. A corroded Bright Hollow survey token lay beneath one body. One of Celine's scholars recognized the mark from records of an unauthorized expedition that had vanished roughly 90 years earlier. That explained why the bones were newer than the arsenal. It also explained the old damage around the gate. The missing expedition had reached this level and tried to force its way through before something killed them. Inside lay the main arsenal. Deep red grooves crossed the floor and continued up the walls at regular intervals. A scholar identified them as tracks for emergency containment shutters. Faded old script warned that the arsenal could divide itself into sealed sections during a security failure. Commander Celine ordered every team to mark the grooves and keep bedrolls, wounded people, and equipment away from them. Nobody knew whether the system still worked. But after 300 years underground, she preferred not to learn by standing beneath it. Rows upon rows of weapon cabinets filled a hall larger than Bright Hollow's Adventurer Square. Many had collapsed. Many were empty. Enough remained. Ren looked around. I understand the smile now. Mira sighed. How many? 84. Then try not to get killed before 16 more. Kale moved with the group. 87. A royal axe beneath a bench. 89. 2 complete spears from a sealed rack. 92. 3 sabers in a collapsed officer's cabinet. At 94, the first Steel Guardian woke. It was not empty armor. 8 feet tall, built from overlapping black plates with a single blue lens in its head and a halberd longer than Mira was tall. Then, 6 more activated. Commander Celine ordered a defensive ring. The battle lasted nearly 20 minutes. These guardians matched silver rank fighters. Kale could damage them, but not casually. The blade of 100 edges cut outer plates only when he hit seams. The impact stone staggered them, but did not break the frames. He fought one beside Mira. Mira blocked. The force drove her backward. Kale stepped inside the weapon's arc and cut at the elbow. The sword opened the joint, but did not sever it. The Guardian punched. Kale raised the stone predator gauntlet. The reinforced glove and 100-hide coat kept his arm from breaking, but the impact spun him sideways. Pain shot from wrist to shoulder. He retreated. The Guardian followed with the halberd point. Mira struck the shaft, shifting the thrust enough to miss his ribs. Ren fired an arrow into the blue lens. The lens cracked. The Guardian turned toward him. Kale saw the damaged elbow rotate. The opening widened. He threw the impact stone into it. The joint locked. Mora hooked the halberd with her spear and pulled. Kale stepped in and cut through the exposed neck assembly. The blue lens died. They had earned that kill. Across the hall, other teams were struggling. Commander Celine fought 2 guardians alone, her heavy sword glowing with pale blue aura. Darius destroyed one with a brutal overhead strike. Whatever Kale thought of him, the man was genuinely strong. That made his behavior worse, not better. He had never needed to sacrifice weak porters as casually as he did. The last guardian fell. 7 adventurers were injured. 1 Iron Crest fighter had a broken arm. No one died. Kale found weapon number 95 beneath the guardian's collapsed body. Then 96, 97. He was checking a high-quality saber when Darius approached. 3 left? Kale looked up. That confirmed it. Darius knew. Kale slid the saber into the backpack. 97 what? Darius smiled. You always were bad at lying. I spent 3 years telling you your plans were good. Pell coughed to hide a laugh. Darius's smile disappeared. Commander Celine called for teams to regroup at the central gate. Darius stepped away. Kale watched him go. Mira came closer. He knows. Yes. Now we tell Celine he has the exact count. Kale nodded. This time, there was new evidence, and Celine had already ordered Darius to stay out of Kale's property. Before they reached the commander, a deep metallic sound rolled through the arsenal. One of the far walls opened. A set of ancient gears had activated when the final guardian died. The scholar from the map room recognized the sequence a moment too late. The old security system was opening a command route while preparing to seal the outer sections after the guardian line failed. Behind the wall was a descending corridor. At its end stood a massive sealed door marked with a crown and crossed blades. The central vault. Every eye in the room turned toward it. Commander Celine raised one hand. Nobody enters until the seal is inspected. Darius looked at the door, then at Kale's backpack. Kale saw the calculation in his face. Treasure behind the seal. 3 items left before whatever Kale was building. Opportunity. Kale started toward Celine to update her. The red grooves in the floor lit at once. The scholar from the map room shouted, "Containment cycle. Core the tracks." Celine ordered everyone toward the open bays. Most of the expedition moved immediately, but they had just finished a 20-minute fight and injured people were still being carried between teams. Kale grabbed Ren and pulled him off one glowing groove. Mira was 3 strides away on the opposite side, helping an injured fighter toward Celine. Darius, Pell, 4 Ironcrest fighters, and Bria were already in Kale's bay because their last guardian had fallen there. Stone slabs dropped from the ceiling into the grooves. Kale jumped back as one slammed down between him and Commander Celine. Dust filled the hall. Mira shouted his name from the other side. The automatic lockdown divided the arsenal exactly along the containment tracks the expedition had marked earlier. Kale turned. He was trapped in a side section with Ren, Pell, Darius, 4 Ironcrest fighters, and Bria, a stocky independent adventurer who had been helping move the wounded. The newly opened central vault corridor was on their side. Darius looked at the sealed door, then at Kale. For the first time since the mine, Kale felt the same cold certainty. Darius had been given a dangerous situation, and he was already deciding who was expendable. The stone partition cut the arsenal into silence. Dust drifted through blue crystal light. For several seconds, everyone listened to muffled voices on the other side. Commander Celine was shouting orders. Mira answered somewhere beyond the wall. Then, an old mechanism ground inside the stone, and the partition settled another inch. Ren examined the seam. That is not moving by hand. Pell looked toward the central vault corridor. There has to be another control. Darius was already studying the same corridor. Kale knew that look. Darius did not see a blocked exit. He saw a reason to go toward the treasure. We moved to the vault, Darius said. Royal facilities used redundant controls. There may be a release inside. Bria frowned. Celine told us not to enter until the seal was inspected. Celine is behind 6 feet of stone. So we wait. Darius turned his gray eyes on her. The mechanism that dropped these partitions is active. We do not know what else is active. Standing in a trapped hall is not a plan. That part was reasonable. Kale disliked that. Darius was most dangerous when greed and logic happened to point in the same direction. Ren went to the wall and pressed one ear against it. Mira says they are working on the outer controls. Darius looked at him. You can hear her? Barely. Ren waited. She does not know. Darius picked up his sword. Then we find another release. Kale did not object. He stayed close to Ren. The central corridor descended gently toward the sealed vault. Ancient weapon displays lined both walls behind cloudy crystal panels. Most were empty, 2 were not. The first held a narrow royal saber with a broken tip. Kale stopped. 98. He opened the case using the damaged latch, rather than breaking the crystal. The saber entered the backpack. Darius watched. Kale looked at him. You're very invested in my inventory. I am invested in understanding assets in my territory. Bright Hollow isn't your territory. Darius' jaw moved. Pell looked away. They continued. At the end of the corridor, they found an antechamber shaped like a half-circle. The central vault door filled the opposite wall. A black metal seal the size of a shield sat in its center. Blue lines of light ran from it into the floor. Beside the seal was a narrow command slot shaped around the crest used on old royal martial weapons. Ren wiped dust from a short inscription and translated it as Emergency Martial Access, Manual Override. To the right stood a display pedestal. On it rested a long, single-edged sword in a red lacquered sheath. The label beneath it was written in old royal script. Ren knew enough to read the number. 99th Royal Martial Blade, he said. Kale stared. 99. He needed one more relic, only if he wanted 100 relics alone. But the merge he had planned required his legendary sword as the base, and 99 relic weapons around it. That meant this was enough. If he could reset the order. The realization hit hard enough to make his fingers tighten. He already possessed the blade of 100 edges. 98 royal relic weapons rested in the backpack. The martial blade would make 99. His next merge was possible. Not safely. Not yet. Darius saw his expression. So that's it. Kale did not answer. Darius stepped toward the pedestal. Kale moved too. Darius was faster. His hand closed around the red sheath. Captain, Bria said sharply. Darius lifted the weapon. It may be part of the vault mechanism. It is on a display. It is next to the seal. Pell looked uncomfortable. Ren quietly shifted one hand toward the short bow on his back. Kale kept his voice level. Put it down. Now you're giving orders? No. I'm warning you not to touch sealed royal equipment while our commander is 10 paces away, behind a wall. Darius held the sword out. You want this? I want a lot of things. 99. There was no point pretending anymore. Darius had counted. He looked at Kale's backpack. You place 100 objects in that thing. Then, something better comes out. Pell stared at Kale. Bria did too. Ren's face remained carefully neutral. Darius continued. I thought you had found a hidden supplier. Then I thought you had a forge. But you carry the same bag everywhere, and every large purchase ends when the count reaches 100. His gaze dropped to the legendary sword. 100 cheap swords disappear? You suddenly own that. Kale said nothing. Darius's smile widened. That's it. He moved without warning, not toward Kale's sword, toward the backpack strap. Darius had been a silver rank fighter for years. Kale was faster than he had once been, but Darius still held the advantage in raw speed. The captain seized the strap and yanked. Kale turned with the pull instead of resisting. Garen had beaten that lesson into him too. Fighting force directly, when the other man was stronger, only gave him what he wanted. Kale stepped forward and drove his elbow toward Darius's ribs. Darius blocked. Pell shouted. Ren reached for an arrow. 2 Iron Crest fighters moved between them. Darius twisted the strap. The old leather buckle snapped. The backpack came free. Kale stepped back. Darius held it. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then, Darius laughed softly. 3 years carrying my equipment, and you had this on your back the whole time. Kale looked at the broken strap. Apparently. Darius opened the bag. Nothing glowed. He reached inside. His hand met ordinary cloth. His smile faded. The 98 stored relics did not answer him. To anyone but Kale, the backpack was exactly what it looked like. An old bag. Darius shoved the martial blade inside. Nothing. He removed it. Tried again. Nothing. His face changed. How? Kale knew better than to explain. Darius grabbed a broken spear from the wall and forced it inside. Still nothing. You bound it. Kale remained silent. Darius looked at him. Tell me. No. Darius set the martial blade back on its pedestal with a hard motion to free his right hand. The room became smaller. Ren knocked an arrow. Bria drew 2 short axes. Pell did not move. Darius's 4 guild fighters hesitated. This was no longer a dispute over salvage. Their captain had stolen another adventurer's property in front of witnesses. Darius knew it too. He changed tactics immediately. You all saw what he has, a relic capable of producing legendary equipment from trash. Do you think that belongs to one bronze rank scavenger? Bria answered first. Yes. Darius stared at her. She shrugged. He owns it. Ren adjusted his spectacles. An unexpectedly difficult legal concept. One of the Iron Crest fighters lowered his weapon. Darius's expression hardened. He looked at Pell. Take them. Pell had followed Darius for 5 years. Kale knew that. Pell had laughed at Kale in the mine. He had thrown him a copper coin. But Pell was not looking at Kale now. He was looking at the backpack in Darius's hand. Then at the sealed royal door. Then at the other witnesses. Captain. Darius's voice sharpened. Do it. Pell slowly shook his head. No. The word changed the room. Darius moved. He struck Pell across the face with the back of his gauntlet. Pell hit the floor. Kale drew the blade of 100 edges. Darius swung at him immediately. Their swords met. Kale's legendary blade did not break. The force drove him backward. Darius followed. Second strike. Kale parried. His wrists hurt. Third. Kale stepped away rather than block. The broadsword cut a strip from his coat. Darius was better. Not slightly, years better. Kale knew the difference. He had improved enough to recognize his disadvantage clearly. Darius used a military style built around pressure. Heavy cuts forced the opponent to defend. Shoulder feints opened the legs. Every attack prepared the next. Kale could not win by matching sword skill. He did not try. Darius cut from the right. Kale retreated. The captain expected another retreat and stepped deep. Kale threw the impact stone with his left hand. Darius had seen the weapon before. He raised his forearm. The stone struck the black scale bracer. Metal dented. Darius grunted but kept his feet. The stone returned. Kale caught it. Darius smiled through the pain. You think I didn't study that trick? No. Kale threw again. Darius shifted his guard toward the stone. Kale moved at the same time. The impact stone hit the wall beside Darius. It missed. Darius's smile returned. Then, the stone reversed direction. He had studied the impact, not the return path. The black stone struck the back of his shoulder. Darius lurched forward. Kale cut low. The blade of 100 edges opened the armor above Darius's knee. Blood appeared. Darius roared and slammed his shoulder into Kale. Kale hit the floor. Darius raised his sword. Kale rolled. The blade struck stone. Kale grabbed Darius's boot with the stone predator gauntlet. The retractable claws bit through leather and into the edge of the greave. Darius tried to pull free. Kale twisted. The injured knee buckled. Darius dropped to one hand. Kale kicked the broadsword away. Darius punched him in the jaw. Kale saw white light. He fell backward. Darius lunged for the sword. Ren's arrow struck the floor in front of his hand. Next one goes through it, Ren said. Bria stood beside Ren. All 4 of his guild fighters had backed away from Darius. One had lowered his sword from the start. 2 now stood near Pell, and the 4th had moved beside Bria rather than obey an illegal order. Pell was back on his feet, blood running from his mouth. Darius was alone in the fight, even though his people were still in the room. Kale rose slowly. His jaw hurt. He picked up the backpack. Darius looked at the martial blade on the pedestal, then at the narrow command slot beside the central seal. He had argued earlier that the weapon might be part of the vault mechanism. Now desperation gave that idea a purpose. If the manual override opened the partitions, he could escape Celine's judgment. If it opened the vault, He might regain leverage with whatever waited inside. He seized the martial blade. "Do not," Ren said. Darius fitted the martial crest near the guard into the command slot. The metal accepted it. For one heartbeat, Darius looked vindicated. Then the blue lines around the seal turned red. Bria pointed at them. "That is a warning. Stop." Darius twisted the blade anyway. The mechanism resisted. He put both hands on the hilt and forced it a second time. The degraded seal cracked. Blue light flashed through the room. For an instant, every ancient mechanism went silent. Then, something enormous moved behind the vault door. Darius stepped back and yanked the martial blade free. The override failed. Bria stared at him. "I will testify that you turned it again after the warning." The vault door opened inward. Cold blue light filled the antechamber. The room beyond was a circular treasury. Weapon racks rose in tiers. Most had decayed. At the center knelt a steel figure, twice the height of a man. Black armor covered its body. A crown-shaped ridge rose from its helmet. Both hands rested on the pommel of a massive sword. Its single eye opened. "Blue." Ren spoke very quietly. "Run." The royal arsenal warden stood. The first swing hit the doorway. Stone exploded. Darius was closest. The flat of the warden's sword caught him across the side and threw him into a display case. The martial blade spun from his hand and skidded across the floor. His black scale armor cracked. He did not rise. Kale grabbed the martial blade from the floor. 99. He shoved it into the backpack. The count showed 99 out of 100. Not ready. His legendary sword still had to be the first item of a new merge cycle. And because the 99 relics had been loaded before it, he needed to reset the bag. That was a problem for later. The warden stepped through the broken doorway. Its sword came down. Kale jumped aside. The blade cut a trench through the floor. This was not an opponent he could defeat with ordinary attacks. The blade of 100 edges could wound silver guardians. The warden's plates were thicker, layered with old enchantments and moving under far greater force. A horn sounded beyond the stone partition. Commander Celine. The separated teams had restored part of the mechanism. Mira's voice came through the corridor. "Kale! Here!" Pell and 2 Iron Crest fighters raised shields together. The giant sword struck. All 3 men were driven backward. One shield split. Kale threw the impact stone at the warden's right knee. The hit left a dent. Only a dent. Still useful. "Same joint," Kale shouted. Bria understood. She hurled one axe. It struck the dent and bounced away. Ren fired at the blue eye. The warden raised one arm. The arrow shattered. Kale moved close enough to cut the knee seam. His sword bit into the outer layer. The warden kicked. Kale crossed both arms. The 100-hide coat and gauntlets saved his bones. The force still launched him across the antechamber. He hit the wall shoulder first. Air vanished from his lungs. The warden advanced. A spear flashed from the corridor. The tip struck the damaged knee seam. She had reached them. Behind her came Commander Celine and the rest of the expedition. Celine took one look at the broken seal, Darius on the floor, and the active warden. Report later. Her heavy sword ignited with blue aura. "Kill it now." The expedition attacked. Even with more than 30 fighters, the warden dominated the room. Silver rank attacks damaged it. Bronze attacks barely mattered unless they hit open seams. The warden's sword could cripple someone in one blow. Commander Celine took the front. Mira worked the right leg. Kale joined her. They struck the same knee repeatedly. Impact stone, spear, legendary blade. Again. The metal finally cracked. The warden dropped 1 inch. Then blue light flowed through the damaged joint. The crack began closing. Ren saw it first. It repairs itself. That changed everything. They could not win a slow battle. The warden raised its sword overhead. Blue light collected along the blade. Commander Celine shouted for everyone to spread. The sword struck the floor. A wave of force crossed the treasury. Racks shattered. People flew. Kale's ears rang. He landed beside his backpack. The mouth had fallen open. The internal count still showed 99. 99 relics. 1 legendary sword. Exactly enough, but wrong order. He needed an empty cycle with the blade of 100 edges first. Kale looked at the warden, then at the broken weapon racks. Then at Mira. I need time. How much? Maybe 2 minutes. She glanced at the giant machine. That is a very expensive 2 minutes. I know. What are you doing? Research. Mira stared at him, then barked a laugh, despite the blood on her cheek. Fine, she turned. Ren, keep him alive. Ren pushed his spectacles back into place. That was already the plan. Kale opened the backpack. He began pulling relic weapons out. 2, 3. The count dropped. He stacked them on the floor. The warden attacked Celine. Mira drove her spear into the damaged knee. Pell dragged Darius away from a falling slab. Kale kept unloading. 54, 40, 21, 0. The bag was empty. He drew the blade of 100 edges. For a moment he hesitated. This sword had changed his life. He had spent weeks collecting 100 blades to create it. Now he was about to consume it. That was the nature of the backpack. Every result could become material for something greater. Kale placed the legendary sword inside first. 1 out of 100. The warden knocked Commander Celine backward. Mira shouted. Kale grabbed relic weapons from the pile. 2, 3, 10. He moved faster. The old arsenal became a blur of steel. 27, 39. The warden's eye brightened. It charged another wave attack. Ren fired 3 arrows into the ceiling support above it. The arrows did nothing. Mira looked at him. Why? Attention. The warden turned its head toward the movement. That gave Celine time to strike its wrist. The wave discharged into the ceiling. Stone rained down. Kale covered the backpack with his body. The 100-hide coat took several fragments. 58, 64, 70. Darius groaned awake. His gray eyes focused on Kale, then on the relic pile. Understanding returned. Even injured, he tried to crawl toward the martial blade. Pell put 1 boot on his wrist. Don't. Darius looked up at him. Pell. No. You owe everything to Ironcrest. Pell's split lip curled. Ironcrest didn't tell you to hit me. He pulled Darius away from the relics. Kale kept loading. 87, 92. The warden's damaged knee repaired completely. Mira swore. We are back where we started. Kale had 7 relics left. The warden swung low. Celine blocked with aura. Her boots carved lines through stone. Mira was caught by the edge of the impact. She spun to the floor. Ren ran toward her. Kale loaded another sword. 94, a spear. 95, an axe. 96. Mira tried to stand and failed. Ren pressed green light against her side. Cracked ribs. Can I move? Yes. Then heal faster. Remarkable medical insight. 97. The warden turned toward Kale, its blue eye fixed on the growing light inside the backpack. For the first time, it changed targets deliberately. It understood a threat. Kale, Celine shouted. The warden charged. Kale grabbed the next relic. 98. The giant sword rose. Pell ran between them with a replacement shield. The warden hit. The shield folded. Pell flew backward. 99. 1 weapon remained. The martial blade. It lay 3 paces away. Kale lunged. The warden stepped toward him. The giant sword came down. Kale could not reach the blade and dodge. Mira threw her spear, not at the warden, at the martial blade. The spear struck the sheath and knocked it across the floor. The relic slid directly toward Kale. He caught it. 100. Merge available. The warden's sword descended. Kale activated the backpack. Light erupted. The old bag pulled inward with enough force to drag loose dust across the floor. All 100 weapons vanished. The warden's blade was almost on him. Kale reached inside. His hand closed around a grip. He drew. The new sword came free in a burst of white-silver light. It was not ornate. That surprised him. The blade was long, slightly curved, and dark at the center, with one bright silver line running along the edge. The guard formed a simple black ring. Fine patterns like overlapping weapon marks covered the steel. The impression that entered Kale's mind was heavier than any before. Relic Sovereign Blade. Divine Grade. 100 in 1. A completed strike concentrates the physical integrity, cutting potential, and compatible stored enchantment of all 100 source weapons into a single contact line. Kale had no time to admire it. The warden's sword was already falling. He moved, not faster than before. The weapon had not magically taught his legs anything. Kale used the stone predator gauntlet to grab a broken rack and yank himself sideways. The giant sword hit where he had been. The floor split. Kale rolled, rose, and felt the new blade settle into his hands. Light moved along the silver edge. The warden turned. Its knee was fully repaired. Kale looked at Mira. Same joint. She was hurt. She still smiled. Of course, the final fight did not become easy just because Kale held a divine weapon. The sword could cut the warden. Kale still had to reach the correct place without being crushed. Commander Celine attacked first. She drove the warden backward with a two-handed aura strike. The giant raised its sword to answer. Kale threw the impact stone. The black stone struck the right knee for what felt like the 100th time that day. A dent appeared. Mira retrieved a broken spear and stabbed the same point. Kale ran. The warden saw him. Its left hand opened. A pulse of blue force hit his chest. The 100-hide coat absorbed only part. Kale flew backward. He landed on one knee and slid. The divine sword remained in his hand. The warden advanced. Kale realized something. It was prioritizing the new weapon. Good. He ran away from the wounded. The warden followed. Celine saw the plan. She attacked its left ankle from behind. The giant shifted weight. Kale threw the impact stone into the right knee again. The joint dipped. He sprinted toward a fallen stone column. 3 steps up the angled surface. Jump. The stone predator gauntlet slammed into the warden's hip plate. Claws bit into a seam. Kale hung from the moving machine. The warden tried to crush him with one hand. He climbed. One grip, then another. The gauntlet dug into metal and stone enchanted plating. Kale reached the shoulder. The warden slammed itself against a pillar. Kale saw it coming. He pushed away. The pillar shattered where his body would have been. He swung from one clawed hand, hit the chest plate, and nearly lost the sword. Mira shouted from below. Center seam. Kale saw it. Every time the warden moved its arms, a narrow vertical line opened over the chest. The blue core had to be behind it. Kale stabbed. The relic sovereign blade entered the seam. The effect was immediate. Silver light raced along the contact line. The warden's outer plate split several inches. Not enough. The machine grabbed Kale. Metal fingers closed around his torso. The 100-hide coat compressed. Kale felt his ribs bend. He drove the gauntlet claws between 2 fingers, held them apart. The pressure increased. Pain blurred his vision. Below, Ren fired into the exposed chest seam. The arrow vanished inside. Blue light flickered. The grip weakened for half a second. Kale tore himself free. He fell. Mira caught enough of his coat to turn the fall into a violent roll, rather than a broken neck. 2 minutes? She gasped. Kale coughed. I estimated badly. Merchant influence. The warden's chest plate began repairing. Kale saw the silver cut closing. Not as fast. The divine weapon had disrupted the enchantment. That was the opening. Again, Celine understood. Everyone who could still fight focused on one task. Not killing the wardens separately, creating one clean line for Kale. Pell and 2 shield fighters struck the damaged right knee. Mira drove her broken spear into the joint. The warden turned toward her. Celine hit its left shoulder with aura. The machine lost balance. Ren fired another arrow into the chest seam. The repair flickered. Kale threw the impact stone into the knee. This time, he did not catch it. He let it strike his open backpack and drop safely inside. Both hands went to the divine sword. The warden fell to one knee. Kale ran up the lowered thigh. The giant raised an arm. Celine blocked it with everything she had. Kale reached the chest. The seam opened. He planted his left foot against one plate, right foot against the other. One complete cut. That was what the weapon required. Not a desperate stab, not wild force. A completed strike. Kale drew the blade across the exposed line with the cleanest motion Garen had taught him. The silver edge brightened. The combined cutting potential of one legendary sword and 99 royal relics focused into a line thinner than thread. The warden's chest opened. Blue light poured out. Kale saw the core. He reversed the blade and struck once more. The core split. The warden froze. Its raised sword stopped above Celine. The blue eye dimmed. The enormous machine slowly collapsed backward. The warden hit the floor hard enough to shake dust from every ceiling beam. Nobody moved. Then, Ren sat down where he stood. I would like to submit a medical recommendation. Mira leaned on her broken spear. What? Never do that again. Kale lay on his back, beside the dead warden. I support the healer. Commander Celine looked at the broken vault seal. Then at Darius. Then at the divine sword in Kale's hand. We are going to have a very long debrief. Pell laughed once. It hurt his split lip, and he stopped. The rest of the expedition reached them over the next several minutes. No one died in the warden fight. Several came close. Mira had 2 cracked ribs. Pell's left arm was fractured. Commander Celine's shoulder was badly bruised. Kale's body felt like one enormous complaint. Ren treated the worst injuries first. Darius tried to speak while being bound. He claimed the manual override had failed accidentally. Bria described him inserting the martial blade into the sealed command slot and forcing it a second time after the warning light turned red. Ren described the theft. Pell described the order to attack witnesses. 4 other Ironcrest members confirmed enough of the story that Darius stopped trying to invent a cleaner version. Commander Celine did not shout at him. That was worse. Before anyone left the chamber, Celine also dealt with the more dangerous piece of information Darius had exposed. She ordered every witness who had heard the exact 100-item rule to give a sealed statement. The public expedition report would describe Kale's backpack only as a bound crafting relic capable of condensing compatible salvage into higher-grade equipment. The exact count, the private storage, and the fact that the relic answered only to Kale were placed under council security until a magistrate could review them. Bria accepted the restriction immediately. Pell did too. The 4 Ironcrest fighters understood that leaking operational details from a council expedition while their captain was already under arrest would put them beside him at the tribunal. Mira and Ren were included in the sealed record because they already knew enough to be targeted if rumors spread. I am not claiming your property. I am preventing every guild in the western counties from learning how to use you as a manufacturing target before we reach the surface. You will answer a magistrate's safety questions. You do not owe anyone an origin story you do not have. Darius had just demonstrated exactly why secrecy mattered. Then Celine turned back to him. You will return to Bright Hollow in restraints. Darius looked toward Kale. The red-haired captain's face had gone pale from pain. This is not over. Celine tightened the restraint on his wrist. Kale did not answer. He was tired of Darius deciding the meaning of every moment. The captain had abandoned him as a porter. Kale had survived. Darius had tried to control his supplies. Kale had found new ones. Darius had stolen the backpack. It had refused him. Now there were witnesses. The problem was finished. The expedition spent another day stabilizing the arsenal before returning to the surface. The central vault contained valuable records and damaged equipment. But Kale did not receive another impossible pile of relics for free. Salvage belonged to the expedition and the city under the original agreement. He received a fair share. That mattered. The legal accounting took longer than the monster fighting. 98 of the royal weapons used in the final merge had been collected as damaged salvage from open halls under the expedition rules. Those were legally part of Kale's assigned share. The 99th relic, the Royal Martial Blade, was different. It had been restricted command equipment beside the sealed vault, and Darius had removed it in direct violation of Celine's order. Celine, Bria, Ren, Pell, and the surviving Ironcrest fighters all confirmed that Kale used it only after Darius activated the Warden and the expedition faced immediate danger. The Council classified the Martial Blade as emergency consumption of Crown property, rather than theft by Kale. Its assessed salvage value was 10 gold. The Warden destruction reward was 40 gold. So the Council withheld 10 as compensation for the consumed martial relic, and paid Kale the remaining 30. Ironcrest's attempt to claim the finished sword failed, because its own captain had caused the emergency, and because the other 98 relics were already lawful salvage. Kale also received a legal salvage license, covering low-value damaged equipment from future public dungeons, and first choice from 3 damaged armor pieces recovered in the upper halls. He chose the least impressive-looking one. Tovin would understand. When the expedition returned to Bright Hollow, crowds gathered at the gate. News had reached the city, ahead of them through runners. People expected Commander Celine. They expected the major guild banners. They did not expect Kale walking beside Mira with a black and silver sword at his hip that made every weapons appraiser in the crowd forget how to speak. Tovin pushed through the people. His black mustache twitched. He looked at the sword, then at Kale. No. Kale laughed. You haven't asked what it is. I don't care. It's divine grade. Tovin closed his eyes. Of course it is. Hessa appeared behind him, carrying a wooden spoon. She hit Kale on the shoulder. He winced. What was that for? You disappeared underground for 3 days. I was on an expedition. You also owe me for a broken chair. Mira was. Mira looked away. Kale stared at her. She pointed at her bandaged ribs. In my defense, sitting hurt. Ren adjusted his spectacles. The chair was innocent. For the first time in days, Kale laughed, without needing to watch a doorway. The official consequences took 2 weeks. Darius Vane was stripped of command by Ironcrest before the city tribunal even finished its inquiry. The guild had tolerated arrogance, aggressive recruiting, and questionable treatment of low-rank workers. It could not tolerate theft during a council expedition, assault on witnesses, violation of a royal seal, and awakening a guardian that nearly killed 40 people. Pell testified. That surprised Kale less than it once would have. Pell later found him outside Tovin's shop. His left arm was still in a sling. For once, he did not laugh. I was there at the mine. Kale waited. Pell looked at the ground. I knew Darius dropped the passage because you were behind us. We all knew. Yes, I laughed when you came back. Also, yes. Pell rubbed the back of his neck with his good hand. I don't have a clever reason. Kale believed that. Pell finally met his eyes. I'm sorry. Kale considered him. Forgiveness was not a debt he owed, because someone finally asked properly. But Pell had refused Darius when it mattered. He had stood in front of the warden with a shield, knowing it might kill him. Kale nodded once. Do better with the next porter. Pell's mouth twisted. Ironcrest has new rules about that now. Good. Kale did not become Pell's friend. He did not need to. Some conflicts ended with people simply choosing not to repeat them. Kale's own life changed faster. The 30 gold reward was more money than he had ever possessed. At 10 silver to 1 gold, it equaled 300 silver, several years of the wages he used to earn as a porter. He did not spend it on a mansion. The neglected 2-story warehouse beside Tovin's shop cost 18 gold because the roof leaked and the previous owner wanted a fast sale. Repairs, registration fees, racks and locks consumed another 3. Kale kept 9 gold in reserve instead of tying every coin up in property. He bought the warehouse and moved in. Tovin complained that Kale had ruined the neighborhood by becoming respectable. The lower floor became organized storage. Weapons on one wall, armor on another, monster materials in labeled bins, food inputs kept separate for reasons Hessa insisted should have been obvious. The upper floor became a simple home. Mira walked through it on the first day. She opened one cupboard. 100 wooden spoons were stacked inside. She closed it again. I am not asking. Good. Ren inspected the shelves. Not currently. Hessa, standing behind him, said, coward. Kale's team became official. Not a guild. He did not want one yet. Just 3 independent adventurers with a written sharing agreement that Tovin insisted they have. Mira handled field leadership when terrain and combat demanded it. Ren managed medical supplies and route records. Kale handled salvage, equipment, and increasingly strange requests for specific quantities. Their first new contract, after the arsenal, involved 20 mud crabs. The creatures were low grade. Kale's equipment outclassed them so completely that the fight lasted less than a minute. A crab raised both claws. Kale tapped the shell with the flat of the relic sovereign blade. The shell split. Mira stared. That sword is offensive. I barely swung. Exactly. They finished the contract and went home. There was no reason to pretend every enemy remained threatening. Kale had grown. The world had levels. Some problems that once would have terrified him were now chores. That was part of the reward. Other problems grew in their place. High-grade merchants wanted to know where the divine weapon came from. The answer available to them was the one in Celine's sealed public report. Kale possessed a bound crafting relic. The Royal Arsenal emergency had consumed legal salvage, and the operational details were restricted. That did not stop rumors, but it stopped every curious merchant from receiving a usable recipe. The city council wanted the arsenal explored more carefully. Scholars requested access to the copied map from the map room, and 3 weeks after the expedition, a courier from the royal capital arrived at Kale's warehouse. The man wore a white coat with the kingdom's blue sun crest. He delivered a sealed letter. Kale opened it with Mira and Ren present. The Royal Historical Office had reviewed the copied map. The grave of divine relics was real. Or at least it had been. Old navigation records described a chain of ruined military ports leading east toward the reliquary expanse. Modern ships rarely traveled that route because storms and sea monsters made it expensive. A royal survey expedition was being considered for the following spring. Because Kale had destroyed the arsenal warden and possessed a weapon identified as divine grade, the office invited him to the capital to inspect surviving records before the expedition was approved. Mira read the final line twice. They are inviting you to the capital. Ren looked around the warehouse, full of scrap. Do we need better clothes? Kale looked at his 100-hide coat. I like this coat. It has warden damage. Mira pointed at the ripped side. It has a hole. Ventilation. They agreed to consider the invitation after current contracts were finished. No one packed that night. No one ran east. Bright Hollow was safe. Their work here mattered. Kale had money, a home, partners, and the freedom to decide what happened next. Later, after Mira and Ren left, he went downstairs alone. The warehouse was quiet. Moonlight came through the high windows. On one table rested the objects that had marked his path. The old collector blade. He had kept it after replacing it. The 100-hide coat, waiting for repair. The stone predator gauntlet. The black impact stone. And beside them, the relic sovereign blade. Kale picked up the impact stone first. The silver lines across its surface were scratched now. It still fit his palm perfectly. 100 rocks. That was all it had taken to change the direction of his life. He set it down. Then he looked at the divine sword. The question from the underground river returned. If 100 stones could become the impact stone, what could 100 swords become? He had his answer. A better question had replaced it. Kale opened the old backpack. The leather strap had been repaired by Tovin with a strip so thick it could probably tow a cart. The inside looked ordinary. Kale placed the relic sovereign blade into the bag. A line of pale light appeared. 1 out of 100. Kale did not move for several seconds. The backpack recognized it. Divine grade did not matter. The sword was still only one item. 1 of 100. Kale slowly pulled it back out. The counter vanished. He looked at the sealed royal letter on the table. Grave of Divine Relics. Then at the backpack. A laugh escaped him. Tovin was going to hate this. Kale sheathed the sword, closed the bag, and turned out the lamp.